This is Force 13 Live. It's 4:30 a.m. in India, and this is what you early birds are waking up to this morning. Something rather scary, I think, might be the operative word. It's Cyclone Amphan. Is that the pronunciation? Amphan. We're still struggling with all of that. Please forgive us. It is rapidly intensifying though at this point, and looking even better on the Himawari satellite at this point. And this storm is likely, already is now, a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. That's winds of 130 miles per hour. That's 210 kilometers per hour. It's 383 miles southeast of Visakhapatnam in India. That's around 500 kilometers. You can see just how well it's looking there. We will have daybreak in a few hours. We'll be here for a few hours as well. An extended show tonight. We're at least hoping to be here for 3 hours, as long as I don't fall asleep at the desk, which is actually quite likely. There's been a lot of stuff going on with me recently, but don't worry, it's not the pandemic. I'm joined by the team in this hour, which we'll be able to introduce very shortly. They'll be there somewhere. First of all, you get to look at me here in the studio. Not too much to look at here, but I can tell you little things here and there. And that information, we need to take that off. That stuff at the bottom, that is old. We'll get that stuff properly working pretty soon. Let's stick with that satellite imagery. There is the cyclone right now. It's the main feature tonight. We also have some other systems active. We have, of course, Tropical Storm Arthuer, which has triggered tropical storm warnings, so we will be talking about that a little bit tonight. And well, yeah, that's about it really right now. Hopefully these buttons are working, and we'll be able to hear the team at this point, which consists of Luke, Isaac, Codemo, Devon, Preston, and Strat. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I know last time they couldn't hear you to begin with, but I'm pretty sure they can this time, so that's good news.
Let's hope so.
Devon, I think you've been watching this storm more closely than anyone. I know we've all been watching it extremely closely, like a hawk.
Yeah.
You were on earlier today. It was today, wasn't it? Losing track of even hours at this point, because all I've been doing is just looking at this storm all day. You can't take your eyes off it. What are your thoughts?
Well, pretty much the thoughts that I think everyone else on the project would pretty much share right now. We've got a very rapidly developing system currently churning here in the Bay of Bengal. It's likely right now that we already are looking at a storm that is at least of 130 mile an hour intensity, which is mind-boggling to think of, considering that this thing was only a tropical depression not even 2 days ago. And there's really no reason to not expect it to continue to intensify. Right now, I think the peak is expected to be 155 miles an hour. Is that right, Nathan?
Well, it depends who you ask, doesn't it?
I'm asking you.
You're asking me. That's probably a fair bet, you know. There's a significant margin of error, not particularly high confidence. You could, at a worst case scenario, this could get to 175, you know. Best case scenario, we have some kind of eye wall collapse, and it may be, you know, limps ashore as a Category 1.
Well, that's landfall intensity, obviously.
Yep, landfall,
That's not talking about what the
obviously we would hope the peak intensity would be right now, because that means it would go down again. But a few things I want to point out before we go too much further, just about at this stage when we're looking at a system like this which has a I think a lot of people would be tempted to call it a pinhole eye. It's not really a pinhole eye because it's quite large. It is what's that? Nearly 18 miles wide. Although it does have sort of that presentation when you look at it from afar. But no, it is quite a wide eye. Well, an average-sized eye for one of these cyclones. But we're looking at it here. I've completely forgot what I was going to say next. Eye temperature. Yes, we're talking eye temperature. The HWRF. You can tell I'm really tired. The Himawari 8 satellite, which is what we're looking at right now, has been fairly consistent with the eye temperature. Now, the eye temperature is something that tells us, or is an indicator as to just how intense, how strong this storm might be getting, along with those cloud tops when we've not got direct observations inside the storm. Satellite's the next best thing. Or microwave, or radar, of course. But out at sea, these satellites, eye temperature, the higher the eye temperature, the stronger the storm. It's been generally in the -50s in Celsius, which sounds very cold, but it's sort of getting towards halfway there to being rather decent. But whilst the Himawari satellite has been in the -50s for a good 2 or 3 hours, the Indian satellite, which you would think would be more accurate because it's positioned more directly overhead of this storm than the Himawari, 2 hours ago had an eye temperature of -67 and has now gone down to -42. Can we make any sense of that data at all?
Well, it might just be that the Himawari is just picking up on like the same spot over and over again, holding at 50, while the IND was picking up some more direct results, and maybe the Himawari was actually lower for a bit, and now it's higher.
Well, yeah, the light's not going to be able to take a direct look into the core of this storm because of where it's positioned. It's looking at the storm at a pretty oblique angle, so it's not going to be able to get into the storm and tell you what the actual.
But that's it, Devon. But the thing is, what I'm saying is, 2 hours ago, the Himawari satellite was still in the -50s or maybe lower 60s, but the Indian satellite was at -67. How does that work?
I think that, if I'm not mistaken,
I don't know.
I think if I'm not mistaken, I think the InSat 3D satellite, I believe the one that you're probably using, doesn't have as high of a resolution as Himawari 8 does, so that may be part of what's going on there.
Could be resolution.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, okay. That could explain.
Okay.
Yeah, just be picking up on the eye wall.
What resolutions are those satellites? I know we're getting a little bit technical here. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit later on. We should talk more about the projected impacts at this point, shouldn't we? It's still potentially 3 days away from landfall, would you believe, according to some models. Is it 3 or is it 2.5 now? 2.5 days for some of the later ones, which is still, it's just a terrible thing to think about, how long this arduous wait is going to be for a storm like this that could potentially come ashore. But indications on and off from some of the forecasters at the agencies as to whether it might speed up pretty soon.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and look through some of the models here just to see if I can get a little bit of a consensus on what they think the landfall time is going to be.
In general, the storm has been moving pretty slowly over the past day and a half to 2 days now. Really has only moved close to 150 miles in that whole time period. It is, in general, expected to pick up its forward speed in between the 1.5 and 3.5 day point at this range. But still, for the next 12 to 24 hours, you could still see relatively slow movement. Before it starts to really pick up its forward speed.
And with that relatively slow movement, it's in very, very good conditions for development with this storm, and it's already a very intense cyclone. And the indications is that this storm could still intensify further, and if it does, you're looking at a very intense storm, Category 5 possibly. If it keeps going at this rate of intensification, and everything's really pointing that this will be a dangerous storm as it makes landfall.
Yeah.
No doubt
I
about
mean,
it.
Something that we should probably be looking at, though, is how much this thing will lose intensity before it makes landfall.
it's not going to make much of a
That's
difference
one.
if.
That's one of the bigger questions here. We've got a few different variables that we can talk about. The geography of the coast of India. It could strike if it was to go further west and make a landfall over in Odisha. Then you could be looking at more land interaction before it gets to those more vulnerable low-lying areas of the Bengal region. And of course it would mean a little bit less time for the storm to intensify. What would you say the worst of the worst would be? I mean, what would you say if this storm just went up to the coast and paralleled it?
I mean, not only would that exasperate land impacts from wind and rain, but it would just probably end up making storm surge in the ending landfall location even worse. We're talking a lot about the wind with this storm because that's one of the leading indicators that for decades people have used to talk about cyclone intensity. But 90% of the deaths from cyclones are flooding related. And when you have a storm like this, that could easily produce a significant storm surge over large land areas that are barely above sea level, only a couple of meters. You could have complete inundation in those areas where there's also massive population densities. And
And even
unfortunately, that's going to be probably the single largest cause of loss of life and damage with this particular storm at this rate. We can always hope that changes, but at the time being, it's looking like a potentially incredibly unfortunate situation.
Taking
and even if it
getting right back to you, Nathan, on landfall. I just looked at all the models here. Got a consensus of 61, 6 of them. Average landfall time 63.5 hours away.
Okay, yeah, so pretty much 2.5 days. And of course, when we're talking about that inundation, the case study, the prime example, the Ebola cyclone, it's going to get mentioned a lot. It's already been mentioned a lot on social media. We're going to keep it to a minimum, but we need to take a look at that for reference. This storm may not necessarily hit that particular area, although earlier model runs suggested that could have been the case at a much stronger intensity. But during...
Models that shifted west.
Yep, they have. But during the Ebola cyclone in 1970, that storm became the deadliest cyclone, one of the deadliest cyclones on record. And most of that was due to surge and inundation. A lot of those islands in the Ganges River Delta, Bola Island in particular, is around the size of Long Island in the United States, but its highest elevation is 6 feet. So that cyclone probably completely devoured that island, and this one would do the same if it got anywhere near it. And in a lot of those areas, more than 1 in 5 people were killed on those islands, and Bola district had a population of around 2 million. Well, it has 2 million people now. I don't know what it was back then. But the problem is with Bangladesh in particular is that its population has nearly tripled since 1970 as well. That's what people seem to forget too. And I imagine India, I don't know about the Indian side, whether the population has increased markedly.
Significantly as well.
Yeah. And compound with the dreaded C word.
Yeah, that doesn't really help things either, because that's going to significantly compound the difficulty of any type of emergency management procedures that are going to need to go on. Taking a look at the models, seeing the landfall looking like the area has shifted, the consensus landfall area has shifted a little bit west towards basically right on the border between Bangladesh and India. Of course, that is definitely subject to change and will continue to change over the next at least 24 to 36 hours. But that's at least what I'm seeing right now. Pretty much a consensus on the India-Bangladesh border, which would
There's
send a massive amount
Yeah.
of storm surge. Like this would be basically a worst-case scenario for Bangladesh.
Oh, God.
And there's still a large population in that region too. You got Calcutta, maybe about 50 miles west of the India-Bangladesh border, and the population in this region is immense, and it's grown, as like you have said before.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a storm that's going to impact a lot of people, and it's looking now with the models currently and their track. It could be a very bad situation for Bangladesh, and it might be
Well,
the worst case, as you said, Devin.
the good news, if there's any takeaways there, really, is that you're going to have Kolkata not receiving the brunt of the onshore winds. So likely storm surge, at least from the consensus landfall point, won't be as significant over there as it would be in the western half of Bangladesh.
Yes, that's for sure. So we continue to watch this extremely closely, just trying to get a little handle on its direction. Let's see if we can just grab that one, because looks can be a little bit deceiving. Is it still a northerly motion there, or is it is ever so slightly west, probably about 350 degrees on the compass, so nearly due north at this point. And as we said, about 380 miles southeast of Visakhapatnam in India. This is Force 13 Live. If you've got any questions or comments for us whilst we're on the air tonight, we'll be here for a while. Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to fare here. You can probably tell I already sound quite tired. You see, I've been doing a lot of other things at the moment. I'm a little bit worn out, so I'm not sure we'll get through the 3 hours, but we'll see where we end up. But this is what we are looking at right now, and unfortunately it's going to go on for a few days longer. Let's see if we've got any questions then. There's a question. Will I get banned for talking about Arthur? If Devon had his way.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the simplest way to put it is you got a disgusting looking tropical storm that okay, I just saw the latest imagery. It looks terrible. Might give slightly inclement conditions to maybe a few dozen thousand people, maybe a couple 100,000 at most, and just potentially knock out power for some people and cause some inclement conditions. And as long as anyone isn't being too dumb and purposely deciding to go out and surf in these kind of conditions, because even with weak systems, rip currents can be dangerous. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. On the other side, we have a
Tell you what though, Strat, imagery on that right hand side of our screen, that shows Arthur. First of all, it looks terrible, but second of all, let's just admire the beautiful quality of that Ghost 16 rapid scan. You can see every single cloud.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It is stunning.
That's beautiful.
It highlights exactly how terrible the storm looks.
It certainly does.
But I will say, on the other hand, other than this disgusting system, we have a explosively strong cyclone in the Indian Ocean with minus 80-degree cloud tops fully surrounding an eye that's trying to clear out fully. That will likely make landfall as an extremely powerful cyclone, impacting potentially tens of millions of people. So I don't think you'll necessarily be banned for asking about Arthur. I know a lot of people.
No, you won't. We'll make sure you won't.
Are asking about America.
But we're talking about pretty much polar opposites there. Hey, no, we can't diss Arthur. The tropical storm watch is in effect, folks. Tropical storm watches, warnings. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
tropical storm warnings are in effect for parts of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, I mean, it's even though about how disgusting it looks, as much as it's hard to admit it, there's still a minor threat to the Outer Banks.
I've seen a lot of questions of people asking, will this thing turn into Cat 5? And I think it should be good to explain that.
There's loads of questions. We will get onto them shortly. I think Devon is going to show us something in a moment. Are you? I won't flip to your screen until you're ready, but I think I know what you're trying to get up for us. In the meantime, I think we've managed to get Luke's screen, so tell us about this.
So right now we're seeing some BD imagery, which is basically what the Dvorak is. And you can see this whole plume of just -80 surrounding this eye. And the eye is slowly but surely trying to clear itself. I mean, you can see it's getting warmer, and that's a good sign that you want to see for a strengthening system. Now, it's not that we want to see it, it's something that you would look for if you wanted to see a strengthening
We
system.
know what you meant.
Now, you can just see it once this thing clears its eyes. Satellite estimates are going to go nuts on this if they haven't already.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. If you're wondering about Satid, by the way, you might be slightly disappointed because their numbers have been a little bit low. Generally, they've been in the 130s. It just cracked 140 not long ago on the raw estimates. Now, the raw Satid estimate is quite... I know I might be talking gobbledygook to a lot of people right now, but just to explain what Satid is, it's Force 13's own satellite algorithm to determine the intensity of storms based on satellite where other observations aren't available. It factors in 6 different points of the eye wall, and it factors in the temperature of those cloud tops in the eye wall, the eye temperature, the eye shape, and puts it all together to generate a number, basically an intensity estimate. But you've got the raw estimate, which is instantaneous, but obviously that's not really scientific, so we have to average it out over at least a 2-hour period and get the weakest image out of that 2-hour period, or 3 hours in some cases, and that's the final score. At the moment, I think it's about 130 exactly, which is happily what the ATCF is saying, so we're in complete agreement on that one right now.
That's always a good sign right now. I mean, what you want to see is just good agreement between all the agencies and satellite estimates and ATCF. If we had that, it would be less just, what the heck is the storm's intensity? More of just like, this is its storm intensity, this is what we're expecting. It's always nice for every agency, every satellite technique to be on the same footing, but usually that's not the case.
No, but in a way, it's nice to get that spread, because
That is true.
and Devon would attest to this, because you've done your own little things on our Force 13 server, haven't you, about getting what is it? What would it be? There's a word for it, isn't there? Some kind of group experiment kind of thing. Getting all these people together and coming up with all the results and sort of making your own model out of all the different forecasters' outputs, right? Inputs. I've not heard from
Absolutely.
Devon for a while. I don't know if his microphone's not working.
You know, I should probably
There
hit
you
the
go.
push to talk button.
There you go.
But anyways, sorry about that. So, 2 things. One, my screen share is ready.
Yep, we're here.
Alrighty. So, I will first respond to the spreadsheets that I made, where basically, you know, I would create a forecast, Nathan would create a forecast, Isaac would create a forecast, Strat would put in a forecast, Marcel would put in a forecast, everyone would put in a forecast, you know? And then we would take the average of everyone's forecast, and then we would make that into our little super ensemble model, and then compare that to what the actual forecasters do. And for the couple of storms that we did, we actually did just as well as Mateo France, maybe even a little bit better than Mateo France, for a couple of the Southwest Indian Ocean cyclones. So I couldn't have been more happy with that.
Have we
It's
tried
just-
it in the Atlantic yet?
No.
Oh, maybe we should.
We definitely should. But anyways, getting on to the graphic that I'm showing you on the screen right here. Obviously, what you're taking a look at here is the Ganges River Delta. And what you're taking a look at here is an elevation map. Just to
Right.
put it point blank, the dark reds going into blacks are barely above sea level.
Yeah.
If they even are above sea level at all. So
Yeah.
any type of blacks or browns are at or below sea level. The deep reds, we're talking a couple meters of being above sea level at best. Meanwhile, the oranges, we're talking 5 to 8 meters above sea level. And then once you start getting to the yellows, we're talking 10 to 15 meters. And we're talking about a storm that could potentially produce a storm surge of 8 to 10 meters high, depending on how strong it is at landfall and how large it ends up becoming. So you're basically talking about whatever's to the right side of the landfall. Anything that's on the right side of this landfall, except for maybe this yellow patch here, we're going to be talking about catastrophic storm surge
Oh my
inundation
goodness.
into this region.
And with models trending that slightly west in the last 24 hours, that landfall area is over there on the left-hand side, isn't it?
Yes, it's basically in this area here in Western Bengal in India, which isn't the greatest place to be because you can see this is an extremely low-lying area.
Extremely.
Now, I will say there is a little bit of a silver lining, as let me go over to the other thing I want to show here, Bangladesh population density.
Okay.
And you can see here the southwest corner of the country is actually some of the least densely populated parts of the country. Now, at the same time, they're still just as densely populated as Bola region, but it's still a low population density nonetheless. And the Jessore region up here, which has a significantly higher population density, that is still in a very low-lying area of Bangladesh up here, could still see significant flooding from this. So
That's at least 10 million people in those three areas you've mentioned combined.
yeah, I mean, we're talking populations densities of getting, at least in the Jessore region here, we're talking population density of over 1,000 people per square
Yeah.
kilometer. And Khulna here, we're talking at least 250 people per square kilometer, which is a lot of people.
Certainly is. The storm is still some distance away. We'll do some checks on where the rainfall is in a little while. But first of all, I wonder if someone here could switch to the Atlantic and get another look at Arthur.
I have reconnaissance up, but I don't
Sure.
have, like, Atlantic itself.
Alright, as soon as someone gets hold of that, we'll throw it onto this screen here.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are curious about Arthur. I know we have the gorgeous Go 6.
Go
Yeah,
6?
short-term
That was a
Go
long
6.
time ago,
Oh,
Strat.
no.
Okay, have it up.
16, not 6.
But
I have
it
visible
does
up right now.
That's
look-
so 1990s, Strat.
I guess I'm a 90s kid, not a 2000s.
That 70s guy, Strat Becker.
In fact, I think Go 6 was the 80s. Never mind. I'm still
That
waiting for
80s
some
guy,
screens
Strat
to load.
Becker.
I have
Yeah.
visible up.
It's on my...
Ah!
Okay.
We'll go to Isaac's screen. There we go. We got something here at last. We're still filling out with all of our new controls here, but there we are. That's obviously not Cyclone Amphan. That is Arthur, which is leaves a lot to be desired. And Devon, I think you'd agree with me by saying not fully tropical. I'm not
That's
saying
a very pretty swirl of clouds.
I'm not saying it's not tropical, but not as tropical as it could be.
Yeah. I think
In
that's...
the
I
first couple of
mean,
frames, it might have been.
It almost looks like the last strand of cotton candy in a blender.
That's actually a
I've-
pretty good representation of that.
Yeah, we've had some very interesting descriptions of the storm, such as a dried raisin, but overall it looks really bad.
Hey.
But
That's a little game that you can play. Send in your descriptions of Arthur on the air right now in the comment
Yeah.
section.
We'll say
There you go.
Abomination.
compared to yesterday's Convection, which was not too organized but still fairly robust, the system is basically falling apart at the seams. It feels like
I don't know, it's got some spin.
it's got
45 mile an hour
spin, but it
winds.
just looks terrible.
It might look terrible, but it's got that spin. It's still got fair amounts of convection. And I think, well, it's there's still room for
fair.
intensification there,
It could still do
Definitely
something,
borderline.
but it's probably not going to be anything too intense. I think we were saying odds of a hurricane, 10% this morning, or
They've decreased even more
Yeah.
now, probably 1%.
Yeah, I would say that. And also, just to get this out of the way now for people that are curious, out of some of the more disagreeing model runs and clickbait thumbnails and stuff on YouTube
Oh
about
yes.
2-3 days ago, there is a broader consensus now that this mid-level low that's going to steer the storm past North Carolina is going to push it out to sea and not trap it towards the mid-Atlantic or northeast. So those thumbnails that were saying, every major model for the most part, except the HWRF as of 18Z, is that this storm will move out to sea. I'm pretty sure the HWF's disagreement even has it as the storm disintegrates, it's just getting absorbed by the low, and that's what sucks it back that way.
I gotta say though, even though Arthur is very weak as we know, again looking at that right hand panel, it's just fascinating to see just how close up you can see that rotation on this satellite imagery. I love it.
I mean, you can't deny it's a low.
Yeah, it's a fantastic satellite image of a
Nothing.
loose organization of clouds kind of minding its own merry business, and a couple of people in Florida decided to name it Arthur.
It should be named.
There you go.
It should be named.
Couple of people in Florida. All right, let's take some questions. Do we have any information from buoys in the area about wave heights? I assume that's in relation to Amphan.
Umpon, I don't know.
You can go check.
What does JTWC say?
Jason, or not Jason, David posted something earlier saying maximum wave heights near the center of the storm were 28 feet. As the storm gets bigger and possibly stronger, that'll probably increase, but that was the maximum as of a few hours ago.
Okay.
If you're talking about Arthur, probably a couple puddles extra.
Okay then.
Do we? Okay, here. Well, someone's just asked a killer question. Do you think Arthur will make landfall?
It would be close.
it's possible.
It's gonna be close. I mean,
If-
is it gonna be strong at landfall? No.
If Arthur were to make landfall, it would certainly be historic in the sense that it might tie the record for the lowest rating on the CDPS at landfall.
I will
Which
say,
is
I think it's 6.4 with Bonnie in 2004.
6.4.
I
Yep.
will say, it was looking more likely that there'd be a landfall yesterday, when there's more of a split over the near term, how far north this thing could get pulled by this upper level low before being pushed out, than there was today. A lot of the models yesterday, even though the storm is a bit further west than where people thought it could have been yesterday, there's a bit more of an easterly push element in the models now.
We're still talking about Arthur, right?
Yeah. It could,
And
could
it is,
push
and
the Outer Banks for
looking at it
landfall.
right now, its movement is pretty much parallel with the coast, maybe slightly moving in towards. It is still around 190 miles off the coast of South Carolina at this point.
Yeah, it'll be close.
Yeah. I mean, whether or not this makes landfall, I mean, you're gonna see the same conditions because it's gonna be on the western side of the storm. And the tropical storm force winds are only right now on the eastern side.
Predominantly, yes.
Yeah, and meanwhile we have Amphan, which could bring a devastating landfall in either Bangladesh or India.
Yep, and we're just going to fly between these two storms live as we look at them right now, and you can see them here on our multi-panel, and that message at the bottom is actually very out of date. That shouldn't be there at all now. We're still fixing things up here. It's taken a while. If you didn't hear the news, we've really had a big reform in how we're working our streams. The biggest reform we've had in 5 years. So there's a few teething issues, but we hope you like the new format and that's more informative than ever. But the questions are one of the most important things for information. Here's one of them. Will Cyclone Amphan be a Haiyan? No. Please say no, guys.
It's not in the Western Pacific. It has nothing to do with the Philippines. It's in the Indian Ocean, and it could hit Bangladesh or India.
All right, here's a...
No.
So there's another one. Will it be a Haiyan 2.0? Okay, we're going to have to ban this.
All right, completely different parts of the world.
Another
guys.
question, will it reach Category 5 status, which is a much more valid question. And I think a few people are going to be on the fence with this one right now. I'm certainly on the fence. I'm not sure.
If
I
go positive,
I feel like it's going to. Sorry, Strat. Are you gonna go? You can go.
if the eye can get positive temperature and stay positive,
Oh,
then
it won't take much at all, but
yeah.
will
But the
it
question
do
is
it?
whether or not it
Oh,
will, while
I don't know.
maintaining these unilateral
I mean-
minus 80-degree cloud tops.
I mean,
The second
Funny
it
still only just managed to do it by our estimates for 2 hours. And it looked
the
great.
the second that Amphan clears out its if it clears out its eye, which seems likely, that's going to be the telling. Can it?
But
Nathan
why does it
says,
seem
sustain
likely?
it?
Why does it seem likely? There's nothing to say that it is
You
going
know,
to clear out that eye.
We don't know
Well-
for sure, but more importantly, regardless of that, whether or not it goes up to 140, 150, 155, 160 miles an hour maximum sustained winds for whatever peak it attains, that's just, category talk for, maybe a smaller amount of people, the exact landfall point, and useful for clicks online. The thing we have to monitor most for this is, flooding caused potentially by a very large storm surge for large population centers that have very low elevations above sea level, as Devin was talking about earlier in the stream. And to further that point, David gave an update. Maximum waves near the center of the storm are up to 45 feet now, from like 28 feet reported earlier today.
That's about
And he
par for
actually
the
just put that in the
course.
stream chat as well. So, we can talk all we want about, will this become a Category 5 and stuff. I'm sure people are interested in that, But in terms of potential land impacts, other than potentially a very small strip of location, and this storm will probably weaken slightly, at least before landfall, fortunately. The larger impact that we have to be monitoring is definitely flooding rather than just wind speeds.
Of course. We're here for 3 hours at this point. Sorry to interrupt. I just got to do my usual spiel. Yeah. We're here for 3 hours, which means we've got a little bit more time to, have a bit of light and shade. And hope that everyone's doing all right out there and deliver the most important information. It's tough out there. So if we do let our guard down every so often and might crack a little joke or two, we're not laughing at anyone's expense, but every so often we end up in these situations where sometimes you just have to laugh. But it is a terrible situation that we've got impending for the eastern part of India into Bangladesh. But we really want those questions, so let's take a lot more of them now. Gareth Ross says, is it me or my untrained eye, but does Arthur not look well organised? You can say that again.
Not well organized.
Eye.
If we were doing Hurricanes 101, example of a terrible looking tropical storm, there it is. an example of a terrible looking tropical storm that's so terrible it's not a tropical storm? Colin of 2016.
And a terrible looking hurricane would be Barry.
And that that too,
Well,
yes.
and there's also Hurricane Earl in '98 too.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a Category 2.
Yep.
Here's
It's
a
a recon.
very curious question. Will Arthur become subtropical?
I don't think it can become subtropical in the same
I
time
think
frame as-
tropical storms have turned subtropical before, but it's extremely rare, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you just go from tropical to post-tropical. You know, you don't typically see a storm after going tropical, at
No.
least on official advisories, phase over to subtropical in the advisories. In terms of, you
Yeah.
know, the actual core of the system, it could, you know,
I
in theory,
mean-
but you probably very seldom, if ever, will see them in official, you know, advisories say, oh, the storm went from being tropical to
All right.
subtropical. You'll see them start to talk about a post-tropical transition
Okay.
more than anything else. There's a question about the sea surface temperatures around Amphan.
Yes,
anyone-
there
I
was a
have that.
question by Pranjal earlier. How warm are the temperatures in the Bay of Bengal? That's something we'd like to see.
I have it on my screen right now.
30s and 31s
Warm.
in Celsius around this.
Nearly off that chart there. So 30
31
degrees
degrees
plus.
That's boiling hot.
And
Yeah.
if maybe you could click the 4 kilometer button on the left, zoom out a little bit for us and see the rest of the basin.
There you go.
So there you are, very warm temperatures. It's over prime sea surface temperatures. What you will notice there though as well, another factor that can just start weakening that storm that little bit, those temperatures start to drop away just a little as it gets closer to the coast.
And
Yeah.
the MPI values are also pretty
Oh my
striking
goodness
here.
me.
100,
Oh my goodness.
175 knots plus.
It's in some pretty favorable conditions, to
Oh,
say the
that's
least.
okay. That was a different chart than the one I thought you were showing. Where's the what's it called? Is the one for TCHP or something on there? Is there?
What?
Is the one for tropical cyclone heat potential?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
There's something like that on there, and I can't remember, and I can't see your screen well enough to tell you which option it is.
I wouldn't know.
Let's see.
But,
Don't mind us. We're just looking through Isaac's screen. I'm struggling to.
this may help a little bit.
In terms of anyone wondering
Yeah,
if
go
there
ahead.
could be any limiting factors for the storm,
Oh, there we go. See it better now.
No.
closer to landfall as well, wind shear could become more unfavorable than its current conditions. Wind shear's 10 to 15 knots at most right now around the storm, which is pretty low, but you can see that kick up as
Yeah,
we get closer to landfall.
And the 10 to 15 knots are not in a direction to hinder the storm's intensification at all.
Yes, Isaac. The one I was looking for was OHC, but it's grayed out on yours, so it mustn't be available.
Yeah.
Instant heat content. Let me see if it. Yeah, no, I don't think it's available.
No, mustn't be available in that
it's grey.
basin. Okay.
But yeah, the MPI values for winds
Storm
here
is still
are over
looking real
175
strong.
Over 175 knots there, and then for pressure-wise, to go with a pressure really quick. Pressure, it's in the 800s there, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, the maximum potential
Yeah.
intensity is way higher than what the storm will ever actually be able to be, unless you're
Of course.
Hurricane
Let's hope
Isabel
not.
or Hurricane Patricia.
We calculated earlier, Devon, that the maximum potential for this storm is 206 miles per hour. But obviously, it's not going to get anywhere near that.
Yeah.
Let's hope not, at least.
What
Let's
we
get
use-
some more questions. I do want to move on a little bit here. Judging by location, how strong in terms of winds and pressure could Amphan get? I'm not quite sure of the grammar of the question there. As in, if it goes along its current track, or which track would be most favourable for the storm, perhaps, was the question.
I think he's just asking like what like the max. I think he's just asking like what the max potential index would be. I believe.
Yeah, I think we went over. I think we just unfortunately went over.
Probably about 175 miles an hour realistically, if everything goes right for it. More questions. Do we think Arthur will improve in convection?
I mean, if it gets flare-ups,
Silence.
it wouldn't have look. It looks so bad that anything would probably be an improvement in terms of Arthur's satellite appearance.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
So,
only one way to go with that, and that's up.
Well, it could completely dissipate in theory. It could do that
That's-
too. But
that's-
any convection's very small and almost completely relegated, displaced to the north of the center of the storm. You're already seeing some rain over North Carolina and potentially stretching into Virginia from the storm because the convection's been displaced.
all right. I've got a bone to pick with someone here in the comments section. Tropical Depression 24 says, "Quit bullying Arthur." But just a few minutes before, he also said, "Arthur looks like hair you would pull out of the shower drain." So I don't know how those two tally, but
Bit hypocritical.
Interesting.
10 out of 10 would recommend that comment again.
absolutely. We've not seen any cones yet. Can we bring up some cones?
JTWC.
Unfortunately, all of our ice cream shops are closed down, but
They
I don't
are.
have any cones.
Here, I'll copy.
I have it up on
Okay.
my screen.
You do? Okay, let's see
I
if
have
that.
JTWC up.
Yeah, and I also posted in the Discord chat the IMDs if you guys want to pull it up later as well.
Nothing's loading for me as usual, so that's excellent. But we'll try and get something up in just a moment. Oh look, Ethan has sent me through a cone. He's not actually in here right now, but he's helping in the background, and you should be able to see this here. Yep, that's one of the cones that Ethan created. I believe that was his creation, wasn't it? We have a few people who do cones.
Yeah.
That was the latest forecast that came out. I think it was just when we started our stream tonight, this morning. So that's where it is right now. As you can see, still some distance away from land, and Ethan at least is projecting it to become a Category 5 with winds of 165 miles per hour. That definitely cannot be ruled out. I'd say mildly aggressive, but I would say anywhere from 150 to 175 you'd probably be forgiven for putting that in a forecast. And weakening there before landfall, just to give you a general idea there. And don't forget that storm conditions, gale force winds, and particularly in this situation, storm surge can happen near the edge or even outside of that cone.
Yeah.
Yep.
What Ethan shows is definitely not the best situation. A 150 mile per hour or less landfall, sort of on I believe the India-Bangladesh border, where basically the river where the delta is and those low-lying lands, somewhere below sea level. That it's just not a good scenario at all. I mean,
Well, I think one thing that needs to be mentioned too, no matter if this is a 150 mile an hour cyclone or if it's a 175 mile an hour cyclone, it still will bring intense damage to the regions of Bangladesh and eastern India. The storm surge is going to be definitely the main threat, along with the winds, just because most of Bangladesh is very low to the ground, and the storm surge from this system is expected to be very high, up to 10 meters in some spots, and it's really just if it's 150 miles an hour or 175 miles an hour, like you see on the graphic, it's a life-threatening situation. So take the system very, very
We're
heavily.
looking at Isaac's image now as well, which is the IMD track. Anything that you want to tell us about that?
Well, they do have the storm making landfall on the 18th there as a very intense, very severe cyclone there, and they have it peak as a extremely severe cyclonic storm for that. and you can see the wind radius there, the key below that. The yellow meaning winds over, I believe that 64 means 64 knots. So the yellow line you see right here is the radius, what they think the radius of cyclone force winds are of the cyclone.
A bit brave to do that in a cone, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the JTWC does it as well, so
I suppose.
they got guts.
I
They're
suppose so.
the official agencies.
But there you can definitely see the risk area.
Yeah, and there has been an increasing alignment that the India-Bangladesh border region, either West Bengal or Odisha to some extent, will see the likely landfall location. Day and a half ago, 2 days ago, we were talking about even potentially Myanmar being a landfall spot. That's mostly been thrown out the window unless a giant curveball is thrown at us. But that doesn't mean that adverse conditions still won't impact those areas as well. Especially if the storm increases in size even more. It already is bigger than Vong Fong, so.
Oh, got some more bad news for you. It's not exactly breaking news territory, but looking back at this image now of Cyclone Amphan, this is the Himawari 8 satellite imagery, and we were talking about the eye at the beginning on how the Himawari imagery can be a little bit misleading because it's not too far from the edge of its coverage. So the eye temperature could be a little iffy. Now, the Indian satellite is positioned much closely over the center of the storm. 3 hours ago, it had a temperature of minus 67. A higher temperature means a stronger eye and a stronger storm usually. Minus 67 3 hours ago. 1 hour ago, before we started streaming, it was minus 42. And now it's minus 34.
A negative trend, in terms of intensification, to say the least. That's definitely a sign of a strengthening system, unfortunately.
Devon, what do you think of that number?
What number, I'm sorry?
The latest from the Indian satellites saying an eye temperature now of minus 34.
That's a pretty big number.
Suppose it is. What it would suggest, if that kept up, that we'd be looking at least a mid-range Category 4 by now, right?
Yeah.
No, I would say higher.
Higher?
I mean, we're way higher.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the temperature needs to get to, but I think it only needs to get to like minus 41 in order for the raw subjective amounts to get up to 155 miles an hour.
No
155
way.
knots, rather.
What?
So, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the eye and stuff. It's very important for gauging intensity. I guess we haven't mentioned as much. That this thing for a significant time period has also had a very solid ring of minus 80 degrees all the way around its eye wall completely.
Which is why it's so significant.
Of course. But still, I don't think the eye makes up for it yet. I think the eye's got to get to the minus 20s, which it could do very soon at this rate, if we're going to consider Category 5 status anytime soon.
I don't think so.
Well, we'll have to disagree on that. But what a few people have started to say, and I wonder if anyone here thinks that it's a relevant comparison, or just that they see it in this storm. A lot of people are saying it's look. Oh, I can't speak. A lot of people are saying that they think it looks like Matthew.
No.
Not.
I think Matthew had was way different.
Yeah, we're talking about completely different parts of the globe here.
I mean, I don't know. It's like comparing. It's like saying, oh, Cesar Gamez looks a little bit like Pablo Martins, but not quite.
It's like comparing an apple to a tomato. They may look similar to some degree because they're the same color, same type of thing in general. They're but in reality,
I
they're
do.
completely
I think I can see that resemblance. The only thing that's missing is that massive big blob on the right-hand side.
So that's
Yeah,
my
Although there is a massive blob that's quite a way displaced to the southeast.
point. That's a point.
I can see it. I can see it. But anyway, let's see what else is going on. Send your messages in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. And you can that gets you straight through to us. And if it does sound like that I am getting some sort of dementia attack tonight, don't worry, it's just because I'm extremely tired at this point. But we continue on with the coverage as we start this early morning over in India. It's nearly 5:30 if you're just joining us this morning, waking up along the coast of India and Bangladesh. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a nasty surprise waiting for you. This storm is continuing to rapidly intensify at this time. Cyclone Amphan. Oh, is it the other way around? Amphan? I'm not sure. But there it is, moving towards the north-northwest at this point. We've just confirmed an eye temperature of minus 34 degrees Celsius. So that's an increasing temperature, and that means a strengthening storm, considering that the cloud tops there, marked in pink, the highest ones, are still persisting, and persisting very well indeed. Those pink areas there on this particular imagery, that's cloud tops in the minus 80s. Colder temperatures depict higher cloud tops, obviously due to the atmosphere. And earlier we did get one or two spots of minus 90s, but I think they've just about all gone now.
Yeah, there might be a couple flare-ups of them here and there, but they're not really sustained. There was a question I think we should talk about before the break because it is going to be relevant. Someone's asking how an eye roll replacement cycle on the system, if one were to occur, could either stifle or stop intensification.
That reminds me, we haven't yet configured brakes.
Oh. Oh. Well, I guess we can use that as an excuse to.
We might have. I don't know. We could try pressing a button.
Don't
Oh
hit
look,
too
we
many
have
buttons, I
configured
don't
a
want
brake.
to break.
We have configured it.
Yay!
Oh, nice.
All right then. Well, that's great. We're going to take a break here at Force 13 HQ. We'll be back again shortly. Slightly delayed. We'll take a short break, collect our thoughts, and we'll be back with you with more coverage on this storm. Sorry if we're sounding a little bit too merry. It is a serious situation. This storm will be striking the coast of India or Bangladesh in 2.5 days' time. And this is an old satellite image as well, so just ignore that part. We'll be back again shortly. Stay tuned. Tell your friends and tag us if you've got any questions or comments for us. And of course, you can keep up with us on social media. next hour of live coverage will begin in a moment. Stay up to date with the very latest on our online cyclone tracker on the website force13.com. The latest always on there. You can also find our YouTube channel, Force13, all in text. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter under the same name as well, at Force13 on there. You can also help the project become even better by becoming an Ultimate Fan on YouTube. To see the full list of Ultimate Fan benefits and to join, visit youtube.com/force13/join. With a special thanks to our top supporters this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colours wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Second hour of Force 13's live coverage today. Our second episode of live coverage, you could say. We're here for 3 hours today. We're just entering our second now. We'll be here until 7:30 Indian Standard Time. It's currently 5:34. Hope you're having a good morning and evening elsewhere around the world. Of course, people watching in the United States, because we've also got Tropical Storm Arthur in the Atlantic, another early season surprise, which has triggered tropical storm warnings. I want to start with a lovely comment that's just come in. I just checked out the Force 13 website and the tracker is godlike, they said. Well, thank you very much for that endorsement. The tracker is indeed godlike, and we've got one person to thank for that. It's not me, it's the tech guy. It's Jason, the tech guy. Jason is someone that you'll probably never get to meet, but who you will, who is responsible for pretty much everything that we've ever done. Well, not quite. Anything that you've ever seen on the Force 13 website. But you can go and look at the Force 13 website, the Cyclone tracker on there. It's really good. Usually up to date. Usually not got any problems. And hey, it's good when we're not on the air. But what would we really like to see, and I don't know if any of you out there have seen the new Earthquake channel that we've launched. We put it up on the left-hand side of the screen every so often. Just search Force 13 Earthquakes on YouTube and you'll find the channel, hopefully. There's a 24/7 stream that's been going on there now for, what was it, 2 weeks now it's been going?
Just
Something
Around.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 2 weeks tonight. In fact, maybe exactly right now, I think it's 2 weeks.
Yep.
So it's been going really well, that channel. 24/7 earthquakes. We want to do one for cyclones. Hopefully we'll be able to do that by the time we get to the hurricane season in the Atlantic. That would be great. In the meantime, we've got to do with what we've got right now, and what's in front of us is this behemoth of a cyclone, Cyclone Amphan. I can just never get it in my head. What? Amphan.
Pun, yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce
Okay.
it. Umpun.
Amphan, which is located in the Bay of Bengal, a rapidly developing cyclone, as we've been talking about in the last hour. And we were going to go to Isaac's imagery because I quite like it. There it is. And maybe we could just see maybe slightly more clearly on the imagery whether the eye's clearing out or not, Isaac.
Yes, on this imagery, this is the AVN imagery. This is imagery that people who have been tracking cyclones for quite some time are probably familiar with this if you guys remember when floaters are still active. You can see on the last few frames, the imagery, they have it go down to the negative 40s and 30s there with the blue soaring up a little bit. Let me see if I can stop that for you in a second. Go ahead and stop it and scroll up. And yeah, you can see that little blue part right there where the minus 40s and 30s are probably starting to happen there. So it is appearing to be gradually clearing out its eye right now currently. I don't know if you guys have any more comments about that.
Well, I'm watching the Indian satellite very closely. They're updating roughly every, well, it varies, generally about every 10 minutes. So we heard before that the eye temperature had risen to minus 34 degrees Celsius. And those of you who are just tuning in and wondering what all these numbers are all about, the higher the eye temperature, we're talking in terms of Celsius here, the more indicative that this is a stronger storm. Usually the strongest storms have the warmest eyes. That's usually a trick of the satellite, showing how deep the eye actually is rather than actually how warm it is. But also the eye wall around it also plays a big factor, because the higher the eye wall and the deeper the eye, and that is two surefire indicators of a very intense tropical cyclone. So we're looking at those numbers very closely to see whether they're changing, and I'll get that next number for you in just a moment. Any comments from anyone else right now?
I would like to say that I don't know if you guys have any information about it, but there was a comment earlier in the chat. Apologies for not reading it sooner, but somebody was wondering in the chat, what are the evacuation procedures for Amphan with the C word going around? What are the specifics on that, if anybody knows?
Haven't a clue. Normally, I would imagine they'd be evacuating millions of people. It's probably more likely that fellow viewers will know the answer to that, because we have quite a few watching from India. So please fill us in if you can, as to what the procedures are, what you've been told in your area, and what you think about it. Whether you think they're doing the right thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished.
Well, Okay. Well, I've been reading up on the Bangladesh news sources today, and I've been seeing that it is appearing like they are setting up storm shelters in numerous educational facilities around Bangladesh to have people take shelter in from Cyclone Amphan. So it does look like the Bangladesh government is being proactive. That's all I've heard out of Bangladesh right now. I don't know if there's any ground reports coming out of there. So that's the current state of what I've read up on.
We'll say the Indian government is actually evacuating some people. I think I'm not the best with the local dialect, but I'm pretty sure it's about 1.1 million people possibly is what they're evacuating at the moment. You know,
right.
Obviously things are very complicated considering the current pandemic, because any evacuations, if you're not doing them very properly and in clearly a social distancing friendly manner, even though a lot of lives could clearly be saved by doing so, in the immediate term, you might end up with an uncontrollable outbreak of a disease on your hand, which is obviously very bad. Well, so it's a very tough situation for these governments to deal with, and hopefully, they're doing everything that they can. If you in particular are in harm's way, make sure you have your own plan ready to go immediately, because this storm is looking like it could be very, very ugly for West Bengal, for Odisha, and just the area in general.
And in the last 10 minutes, we've got that new eye temperature. It's gone down ever so slightly. It was minus 34, now down to minus 36. So hovering around that mark right now. So we'll wait and see on any more information. Obviously, a 10-minute interval is far too little to get much out of.
I'm not sure if does anyone have the current warnings up for the system? I know there's some watches and advisories up that.
Well, I've never understood how all these warnings work over there. A bit worried about how we're messaging them here. What we're doing here at Force 13 is we're going to be employing it as if it was in some of the more familiar areas. We're putting out cyclone watches 48 hours prior to tropical storm force winds, and cyclone warnings 24 hours prior. But I think they do warnings on a much more local level in a lot of these places.
Yeah, I had the IMD website up right now. They have a whole set of warnings that they go through. They have a heavy rainfall warning, for example, for Odisha and West Bengal, and then there's wind warnings already for Odisha and West Bengal, along with sea specifics on sea conditions and fishermen warnings as well.
Yes.
Also, storm surge expectations of them right now could be on the low side. They're saying 3 meters above astronomical tide right now is possible. Of course, even for very low-lying areas, because of how close they are to sea level to start with, this could already potentially be devastating, just 2 to 3 meters. If they end up having to revise that upwards, then you're looking at a very, very bad situation. And those are the general advisories that are in place at the moment from the IMD.
Yeah, I mean, what we're gonna see is just as the system gets closer and closer, the more warnings that we see pop up. Surprisingly enough, IMD has been a bit lowballing with this system recently. I'm not sure about Bangladesh, really. I think they just take the IMD forecast. So their intensities are a bit lower than what the ATCF file says, JTWC, or what we say as well.
Some more questions here then. Has a tropical cyclone ever produced cloud tops of minus 100 Celsius or less? Twice at least. One of them was last year. Wasn't it?
I believe so. Although it's very, very hard to do. We're looking at a storm with minus 80s here consistently, and that alone is very impressive to have consolidated around a core structure.
Minus 100. Oh, yeah. No, it's happened quite a few times actually. It does happen more often in the sort of southwest Pacific. Tends to be more than anywhere else, and the deep tropical West Pacific sometimes. But that storm last year, was it Kamuri?
I believe it was Kamiri.
Yeah,
Because it
Kamiri
had, like,
did
some-
have-
Typhoon Kamuri.
Usually when we do get tops of that cold nature, they usually are seared systems too as well. They're not fully developed full CDO storms. They're usually, when they get to that level, I think in most cases actually, maybe all cases are seared systems when they get to that stage, when they get those really, really cold cloud tops.
Yeah, I think so.
Back to our multi-panel view whilst we take some more questions about Arthur here, if I may. Could Arthur hit New England, asks Giovanni.
We went over this morning, and I'll go over it again real quick as the person in the stream from New England. 3 days ago,
As he likes to constantly remind us all.
or even 2 days ago, there was a model split. Some were saying that the system around this mid-level low that's coming down that is now forecast to push it out to sea with a very strong consensus. There was an initial belief on some models that instead it could try to wrap it around into the mid-Atlantic states as Arthur got absorbed by it. And thus you saw a lot of clickbait, thumbnails and stuff and titles. That's not true anymore. It's every major model either has the storm getting pushed out to sea by this and dissipating, or getting pushed out to sea initially and then absorbed by the upper level low right after that.
Damn them
Um,
clickbaiters.
Yeah, damn the
Yeah.
clickbaiters. Because, yesterday, even when there was, a bit of a model split, but, the trend was becoming more clear that it would probably end up getting pushed out to sea. You're seeing a lot of thumbnails with, with the showing a low pressure off the coast, like right off New Jersey, with arrows pointing at the state and
Oh
stuff.
my goodness.
And that's going to make people believe that, there's potentially an impact coming towards them within 3 days, which is not happening.
Let me just say this to camera right now. On Force 13, we will never, 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 ever clickbait. But we might launch a parody channel one day if some people want to do some clickbaiting for us. But it's not going to be anything to do with me.
No. Also, I do think we should point this out, just because we haven't talked about this all. There's actually an invest in the South Indian now.
Is there?
Spawned from the same monsoonal area that actually generated Amphan itself, 98S, and there is actually model support for its development in the next few days.
Okay.
The GFS develops it. I think the European does as well. The European develops it within the next 3 days.
No, don't.
Let's see. I think the NavGem tries to develop it. The Icon isn't on board with it yet. But you could see.
Oh,
the CMC's
hold on. Isaac just has it on his screen there. That's a good idea. We can show that.
It.
So
you could see a late season system in the Southern Hemisphere still.
For Australia, no less.
I think by that point it's supposed to be dissipated.
Well, it's got well, two of those model solutions have pressures in the 980s to 990s. So
the parent GFS run has it as a dissipated system, barely recognizable by the point it gets to that area. I think the European.
We better hope so, hadn't we?
European's in the same boat. Actually, the European might be having it.
I don't think I could handle any more storms in the next week.
But even at that point, that's it's about a week out. It's technically close to the realm of possibility. But
I mean, if we keep getting storms, the Tropical Weather Bulletin series will never start up again. I'll never have the time to make the new format that I'm supposed to be making.
It looks like it's gonna be sheared to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is, it will likely not become particularly intense at all. But, something to monitor if you want to see potential late season activity in the Southern Hemisphere.
Let's take a lot more questions, because there are a lot. Dante's Peak says, will the Himalayas get massive snow from this storm? I bet you've not thought of that one yet.
I was actually thinking about that. I was kind of like looking at the cone that Ethan made and was like, that's supposed to stall near the Himalayas. So that would be interesting. I haven't read up on that. Does anybody else have that?
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure whether I read about it or whether it's true that some storms in the past did dump huge amounts of snow on the Himalayas, but I don't know. I can't remember whether I read that or not, or whether I just
if
assumed.
the temperatures are cold enough, then, in technicality, you could see snow if, up in the mountainous areas, very high elevation.
Oh well, it can happen in late season storms in normal conditions, can't they?
Yeah, Sandy in 2012 caused 3 feet of snow in West Virginia, for example.
Yeah.
Again, completely different basin, but that goes to show tropical cyclones. When it's a colder location with higher elevations, you can see those conditions pop up. Yeah, so I wouldn't rule it out.
I don't think any of us here have ever trekked the Himalayas, so we're not experts on that, I'm afraid. Is it going to go through an eyewall replacement cycle? Any thoughts?
It's a possibility, but looking how it is right now, it doesn't look like it's about to happen within current time.
Yeah, it could happen. Because it's still 2.5 to 3.5 days from landfall. That brings the question on if it were, hypothetically start right now, would that be a plus or a minus? Because in the immediate term, it could stall intensification or weaken the storm slightly. But at the same time, that means that the eventual storm that comes out of it will have a larger wind field and have a larger area of influence. And when you're talking about potential 5-meter plus storm surge already for areas that localized have maximum elevations above sea level of 2 meters, expanding the area where the worst impacts of storm surge could occur is not good. So, even though we like to talk a lot about categories, that's, what is used to generalize intensification and strength of a storm, when we're tracking this into the Bengal Delta region, we need to be monitoring potential storm surge probably more than anything else.
Now we're looking at
And
this microwave imagery.
even though an eyewall replacement cycle could be negative temporarily, not sure long term whether or not it'd be that great or bad. Yeah. I think that microwave imagery ends a while ago, though. It ends like 12 hours ago. At least the animated loop. I'm sure there's more up to date imagery, single images.
The
I know
last frame was around 11 UTC.
So like 13 hours ago, long
Okay.
time. It's
Well,
we've
back.
seen in our Discord server, the public server, links in the description.
Oh yes.
If you guys want to join and communicate about the storm there, people
Bash
be posting
strat if you
individual
want as
microwave
well.
imageries. Yep.
No,
Individual
don't
microwave
do
passes.
that. The moderators will kill you.
Yeah,
If you
individual
bash strat.
microwave passes have shown a much more complete structure than what we were looking at 13 hours ago. And that's why
Yes.
you're able to see a storm as impressive as this. I'm not sure, Isaac or Luke, if you can pull up an individual image pass. I know the University of Wisconsin is really great for
I
those
can.
loops, but sometimes they take a while to update.
We'll do that in a bit. Let's get some more questions. Could Arthur hit Bermuda?
That's actually a more relevant question than the East Coast one, or Northeast Coast, to be honest.
Yeah,
At this
I'd
point.
agree with that actually.
Because the consensus with this getting pushed out to the east by this mid-level low once it comes down is that as the system turns post-tropical, depending on how far north it gets while getting pushed away, that it could end up bringing some rain and gusty wind to Bermuda. The European is further south at the days 2 to 3. So the European gives tropical storm force winds as the storm goes post-tropical. The GFS is a bit further away and brings it there as a disintegrating storm as it gets absorbed. But, still possible to get some rainfall in Bermuda at least.
Here's a question. Why are we substituting coronavirus with the C word? That's just something that I'm doing. I'm bored to tears of saying it. I'm bored to death of hearing the word. Just gonna call it C word. Whatever. The thing. That damn stupid whatever. I don't know. But if anyone is suffering with that dreadful virus, then we hope you're well, and we hope you can get well soon. There are many hundreds of thousands of people. We did do quite a few updates in the early stages when things were progressing very quickly. We decided to stop those later on because it's not really in our field, and it just went beyond, just too far beyond our scope, really, wasn't it, in the end?
Going back to what Strat was mentioning earlier, I have the latest microwave image I was able to find was from 1501 UTC today. This is the latest. It's a little. I know it's really pixelated, but this is the best I could do in terms of newest.
You said about 15Z?
Yeah, 1501 UTC.
9 hours ago.
Keep in mind that this then will still, I think that's still about like
9 hours ago.
It's really old,
still
but it's the
pretty old,
latest.
but-
So, well, if I go over to Navy, it's a lot worse. The latest image is from 1153.
Oh
So
god.
this is the best. I
You
could
know
do,
it's bad when
unfortunately.
you've got all them red boxes there. By the way, that
Mike-
Navy Red's website still looks like it's in 1997.
some microwave imagery fleeting, but Isaac could probably describe it a lot more. Compared to the cutoff at 1145Z, that's a pretty dramatic improvement in appearance on the microwave imagery.
Yeah. Clearly
This is
the
from
eye
hours.
was there.
This is from hours and hours ago, so this could be different here, but this is what it looked like as of
They could be poles
1501.
apart from that now.
Yeah.
We'll obviously get some more eye data, which coming in roughly every 10 minutes. Just coming up to 6 a.m. over in India right now. If you do have any questions for us, we particularly want to hear from you if you are in the line of fire, as it were, in the next 2 days. We want to hear from you, as long as it's safe to do so. Send us a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Here's some more questions. Do we think Arthur has a high chance of landfall on the Outer Banks? Well, the NHC think there's enough of a chance to give it a tropical storm warning. But it would look to me on that imagery, guys, and I think you'll agree, it will miss by maybe 50 miles.
Yeah, at this rate, that's probably correct. It doesn't mean inclement conditions can't still occur, but landfall, and unless the wind field were to change for winds to get significantly onto the western side of the system, they might even get away without having tropical storm force winds. They could still have gusty conditions, though.
Alan Song wants to know if we're going to consider an upgrade to 125 knots, because it looks significantly better than earlier in the day. We are not going to consider any kind of upgrade until after we finish our commentary tonight. So after 7:30, we might push out an update within the following hour if we think it's necessary to bring to you some breaking news of a big intensity change. But we are not anticipating a change to the intensity whilst we are speaking to you on the air. And when we do get to 7:30 a.m. Indian time, we will hand back to the automated stream, which basically looks like this, but just shows you can pop in at any time and take a look at what the latest imagery is looking like. And of course you can chat in the chat section. People tend to be making friends there, and enemies at times. What is the highest recorded eye temperature for a tropical cyclone? We had this question earlier in our Discord server. We believe the answer is Typhoon Judy in 1979, with a temperature of 34 degrees Celsius. There are a few that come close to that, so I'm not sure on that number exactly. There's a few that come close, but that's generally around the limit.
Wasn't that the same? Sorry, wasn't that the same typhoon that was 800 millibars in a Cat 4?
I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
I can't remember. Here's more questions. Will the easterly shear remain with the storm until landfall?
I mean, right now the shear environment around Amphan is pretty favorable, especially because the shear that's occurring.
You can see it there. I think the eastern side of the bulk is a little bit jagged.
The southwestern quadrant is the most impressive by okay margin. The eastern side, since a day and a half ago.
You see what I mean? There's a sign of wind shear when you get a big sign of wind shear there. When you've got those big contrasting colours on the eastern side, you've got pink, minus 80s, going straight to the 1 point orangey red, which is minus 50s and 60s in the space of 19 miles. So that is quite often a sign of shear.
Yeah, unfortunately, that shear isn't inhibiting the storm too much at the moment.
No, it's not. Clearly, it isn't doing that.
With wind shear closer to landfall, as well as sea surface temperatures becoming very slightly less favorable, you could see wind shear pick up right before landfall as well. But for the time being, despite it having at least some sort of presence, it's not doing too much to stop this storm.
I would like to mention that the first visibles are coming in from Himawari 8.
Yes.
And they are quite striking. I have it on my screen now.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we have breaking news. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center says the raw T value is now approaching 7, and they say that they are potentially considering a Cat 5.
Now, where is that information from?
It's in the discussion room, Ethan. I'll put it on my screen.
From? Okay, well, they're considering Category 5. I don't think it's time. Honestly.
Yeah, I think most notable out of that was as of 45 minutes ago. That was 2345Z.
I just don't think we're there yet.
I think once the eye does whatever it should, I think then at that point Cat 5.
If the eye were to clear out, you could see probably a Cat 5 if it were to go to positive temperatures easily, just because the cloud tops around the eye wall are so cold, consistent minus 80s. But like I've been saying, wind speed, once it gets very strong, as soon as we're really closer to where we are right now, anything significantly above this upwards, so even the difference between 150 or 155 and 160 isn't going to matter much, because we know that this is going to be an incredibly destructive storm no matter what the exact intensity is going to be. And again, to reiterate, I know we talk a lot about the wind speeds because that's how a lot of people classify the exact strength of tropical cyclones. The most deadly feature of cyclones is flooding, with about 90% of the deaths. And we're looking in particular with a storm like this, especially if it expands in size, which hopefully it doesn't, a very significant storm surge impacting low-lying areas barely above sea level in the Bengal Delta region, impacting millions of people potentially.
Tens of millions.
So yeah. So even though we talk a lot about intensity and stuff, and it's a way to gauge, how a storm is performing, in terms of exact damage potential, we probably need to be managing potential storm surge more than anything else. Right now, we can get a look at the maximum wave heights and stuff. I know David gave us an update last hour. That maximum wave heights near the center of the storm are 45 feet, which is over 10 meters. Right now, even the IMD was saying earlier today a 2 to 3 meter storm surge. Even that alone.
Latest from the Indian satellite, eye temperature has risen again. It's now up to minus 29 degrees Celsius. So now we'll conduct a SATID on this and see what we get.
And I mean, the eye isn't small. It just looks so small just because of how massive this system is. It's quite remarkable.
That eye's about 18 miles wide.
Yeah, we were talking about Vongfong a couple days ago. That was like 7 miles wide, I think, or something like that. So it's already more than double than that. And if an eye wall replacement cycle occurs, it'll probably get larger, to be honest. If we were to take out a zoom out of this storm and place it over the same areas where Vongfong was a couple days ago, you'd see a notable difference in size. This one's definitely larger, which, in terms of impacting large population densities and producing storm surge, is another downside factor, unfortunately. While you're doing SATID, I want to go over a couple of questions in the chat.
Go right ahead.
Start your message with Force 13 and text lights up in a nice orange color for us. Let's see.
I don't like orange, though.
Well, I mean, I don't think we really get a choice for that, unfortunately. Let's see. There's a question. Someone's asking chances of an eye wall replacement cycle.
We did have that question before, yeah.
I mean, you can't predict the exact time one will occur, especially when we're not getting any microwave imagery right now. We haven't had some for several hours. But when you see very intense storms, more often than not, they do occur. We mentioned it earlier, even if that were to halt or weaken the storm a bit in terms of intensity, when we're talking about a potential devastating storm surge as the main life-threatening condition, that could end up being a negative, unfortunately. So we'll probably see one occur eventually, just not necessarily within the next hour or two, unless a new microwave image shows something completely different.
Isaac.
Yes.
Is this you showing us this image?
Yep, I just made that about a minute ago, and I'm just in awe of how striking that is. That's amazing.
Wow.
So this will have been a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. This was, I believe, taken 5 minutes ago from the satellite.
So
You can just see the power.
First visible imagery
The power
of the storm right now.
On the far top left corner, you may not be able to make it out because of the resolution of this screen insert, but there's India.
Yes.
On the very, very
tiny
top
little
left.
pink outline, yeah.
And they got the islands to the right of it there. Just all-around striking and striking look the storm has right now.
Our own view here as well, just about to emerge into the daylight. We'll touch up some of these images and we'll put it on social media later on. You're free to do that for us as well if you'd like, Isaac.
Yep.
But as it is right now, there it is, with visible imagery starting to appear. Elsewhere, the National Hurricane Center have put out an update. This is not too a little while ago now. We've been caught up with all of this. Just to say on that, their pressure has gone up a little bit to 1004 millibars, but no other changes really. Arthur's outer rain bands are skirting the North Carolina coast, they say.
And speaking of updating systems, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has upgraded Typhoon Amphan to 150 miles an hour and a pressure of 919 millibars.
No.
Wow.
Wow.
Just can't.
They have gone all in.
They don't usually do that.
They've gone 160 if they've gone all in, but
I mean, they've gone all in on pressure at least. What is it? That's like 40 plus millibars lower than the
919
last update.
now.
Hold up.
Wow, that's like 10 miles per hour away. Well, actually 7, considering if you're going exact.
That is like
Away from Category 5 status there.
All right, so now I think that we would have to legitimately start to consider this storm one of the strongest ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think we're anywhere close yet. Honestly, I still don't think we're anywhere close yet.
yeah.
If we're at 150 miles an hour, yeah, we're pretty close.
I don't see it. I just don't see it right now. Maybe in a couple hours.
What would Sati say in like 2 to 3 hours if it were to verify out like this? 'Cause I know you're doing Sati.
I don't know yet, but I have got the number right now, but I'm not going to disclose that.
I can tell you, let's see here. It had this feature, has had this eye feature since, 20Z? Right now, what is it? It's, 18th? No, it isn't. What time is it right now?
0Z.
It's 0Z. So if it holds this feature until 2Z, we're going to be taking a look at a Cat 5.
Well, that's sobering news. I mean, I'm not trying to be awkward, but I just don't see it right now. And I'm still on the fence whether we'll get to Category 5 or not. I think it could well do. It really wouldn't surprise me if it did. We know what this basin can be like sometimes.
What do you
I'm
mean?
just not so convinced. Although it is getting better with that eye temperature increasing.
What did you say the eye temperature was down to? Minus 26?
29 now. So, we're still because of the lag rule that we have on our satellite estimates. We're still waiting for that to catch up. So, I can tell you hypothetically, if it stayed at minus 29 and the cloud tops remained the same right now, yeah. So we would be looking at probably. We'd probably go 150. Yeah.
Wow.
So if
That's not what I would go with.
I know, but okay, they're going with 150 right now. I think they've jumped the gun slightly, but I am saying that yeah, if it does remain like this for another 2 hours, I will agree with them on this.
If it stays like this for another 2 hours, that would jump the gun to give it 160 miles an hour. If it maintains this structure for another 6 hours after this, we'd be talking about 180 miles an hour.
Oh my.
And that's via the subjective technique that I'm going by, with the cold, dark gray cloud tops going all the way around the eye with an off-white eye, because all that you need for an off-white eye is for an eye to be warmer than negative 30, which we have. We would be talking about
one frame so far, but yeah.
It's only been in one frame?
So far. It's the first frame to have it above 30.
Okay. Never mind then. So we've been above 30.
Yeah.
Above minus 30 until this moment, yes.
Oh, excuse me. Never mind. It's the threshold's actually minus 41. So.
Oh.
Yep. Threshold minus 41. Now taking a look at the chart. Yep. threshold's minus 41.
All
So
right,
as
I
long
think-
as it stays warmer than minus 41.
Right.
Oh.
That went a bit technical. We've probably alienated a lot of viewers, but in essence, this storm is still intensifying, and it has a fair chance, and definition of fair, in my opinion, is 50% of becoming a Category 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heads or tails?
I mean-
I'm going to choose neither of those. I'm going to hope that it lands on the side of the coin.
Oh, it's...
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Let's get
if
some
we
more
look-
serious, immediate questions right now. We want some here. Will we feel tropical storm force winds from Arthur in the Raleigh area?
No.
Heck no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a message. I know the current situation is serious, but is there a way to access the Hypo Earth tracker still? There would be
No.
if there were actually any Hypo Earth storms that were being generated, but that's still manual input, and we've not had time to do that since January. So good luck with that. But we wish we could.
No. Hyperworld Tracker was discontinued back in 2016. So, nope.
Well, that's different to Hypo Earth. Let's not get into all of that. There's more. We're getting a remarkable amount of questions about whether Arthur will become subtropical for some reason.
I mean,
Storms
Probably.
typically don't transition from tropical to subtropical.
I mean,
That's
the
what I
only
said
thing,
earlier. Yeah.
The only thing that I can think of, like a storm first being tropical and then being subtropical, wouldn't even count. I mean, Beryl was tropical and then it dissipated and then it became subtropical, but that's not even what it was like.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something completely different.
the closest you could get to that is a tropical system that dissipates or turns post-tropical, and then a few days later becomes subtropical again, and then retransitions back into another
I'm
tropical
sure it has
cycle.
happened on a rare occasion,
Operationally-
but
Operationally, I know that Nadine back in 2012 was said to transition from tropical to subtropical to extratropical back to tropical,
oh my,
but
What?
that was revised in postseason analysis to
Yeah.
just be from tropical to post-tropical back to tropical.
yeah.
This is a question from Facebook, actually. I'm pretty sure Devin will be
A
able to.
question from
answer this
Facebook.
one. Yeah, someone's asking, what are
Okay.
the steering factors for Amphan at the moment?
North.
Yep, mainly north. Very slight bit of west, I think it is right now.
Yeah, they're asking, what is determining that, and how far in an easterly direction could it go after it starts to curve up?
I wouldn't expect landfall any further. Honestly, taking a look at the latest model trends, I wouldn't expect a landfall much further east than Bola at this time.
Yeah, no.
But I wouldn't necessarily rule that out. But I wouldn't expect a landfall much further east than Bola at this time.
Yeah, and also
would agree
another
with that.
question coming in. This is probably going to be a useful one to answer because this is, I guess, the largest major city in Bangladesh that could see near landfall is what is generally expected conditions for effects on Kolkata at this time.
Kolkata's in India.
Oh God.
And right now, we're expecting the conditions in it's really difficult because it really depends on where the storm makes landfall. If the storm passes to the east of Kolkata, you're not really going to have to deal with the storm surge there because you're not getting the onshore winds. So that would be a best case for Kolkata. Obviously, I would think that it's in a region where they definitely should be preparing for cyclonic winds in excess of 75 miles an hour at this time. But it's looking unlikely it's going to make landfall to the west of Kolkata. If it were to, then you would have to worry about the onshore winds, thus also worry about the storm surge. But being 2.5 days out, it's really difficult to tell exactly where the storm's going to make landfall, and a difference 5 miles east or west will make a massive difference in storm surge.
Yes. More questions here, quite all over the place. Are the Atlantic sea surface temperatures above average for this time of year?
Yeah.
I think above average would be selling it short.
Yeah.
I can bring up the ocean analysis.
Overall, the basin itself is significantly above average.
Yeah, the Atlantic Hurricane Basin right now is new wave oven levels of above average right now.
Well, the Nino is going down.
Yeah, with the El Nino index, as Luke said, has dropped off in the past month from plus 0.6 to about minus 0.3. So significant difference in a pretty short time frame. It looks like, especially if you look at the Eastern Pacific anomalies around the equator, that we could potentially be entering a La Nina.
Very curious. What is the coldest temperature a Category 5 has ever formed in? That's a good question.
Ever formed in?
I think they mean like reach Category 5. I
Yeah,
know
that's what I interpreted.
cold temperatures for tropical cyclones a lot. With like Pablo last year, for example, in the Atlantic, but I'm not sure about where the coldest Cat 5 system became a Cat 5 at.
I would reckon Isabel's got to be up there.
Yeah.
It's true.
It would take extensive research. Haven't got a clue
Yeah.
at this juncture.
Typhoon Nestor of 97, maybe, also.
How warm?
If you even still have that as a Cat 5?
I don't know. It would have to be one that was not really in season. So you'd thinking maybe one of them December, January, February Westpac storms, or
Mutic?
I wonder what the temperatures would have been for Hurricane Ava, maybe.
What were the temperatures for Retip?
Wu-tip? I don't know what I mean, but the temperatures still around the Philippines are still around 30 degrees Celsius, even in the wintertime.
Yeah,
so
piping hot.
It's true. If you want to look,
I don't think that would be it. It would have to be a high latitude system.
yeah, look.
Honestly, those are the two that jump right out at
Noru,
me.
anyone?
Well,
Oh,
you know what?
that thing.
Maybe
Lamb?
Noru.
You were
Lamb?
asking this question.
Chaba?
Your job.
I'm thinking of them
No.
now. They're coming.
I will say, viewer that asked that question, your job now is to go do this research and find it for us and present it to us either in the stream chat or in the Discord
Because that's the
server.
strat way of doing things. You ask us a question, you go answer it yourself.
Yeah.
Take it as an
No, but seriously, if I were to guess, I would probably say Isabel, because that gained Category 5 status pretty far north and east in the Atlantic.
Okay.
Same thing with Irma's also got to be up there,
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure both of those achieved Cat 5 status in 27 to 28 degrees Celsius waters.
Got a lot more questions. Is it weird that for 5 years straight we've had an early storm in the Atlantic?
Well, it is a record.
6 years straight, is it now?
Yeah,
It's 6.
and it is a record, so it is pretty unusual.
Yeah, I would call that to be significantly unusual. I mean, yeah.
We've got a lot of questions about how do we do Satid. I promise you one day there'll be an instructional video or something. It's not worth explaining right now, but just trust me till you get that instructional video. Go ahead.
Put numbers into a spreadsheet.
An algorithm,
it spits
really.
out a number.
Devin, here's one that you might want to answer here from James. What's the difference between the raw, adjusted, and final T values on the Dvorak calculations?
Yeah, that's something I could definitely explain here for you. All right, so this arises from how the Dvorak classifications are actually created for satellite estimates. So when you have the raw estimate, when you take a look at that, that is, without any other context provided, what the strength of the storm is exactly on the image, considering nothing else. Now, obviously, that's not accurate because storms fluctuate very rapidly. And obviously, the winds aren't fluctuating very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
But storms can fluctuate very rapidly in appearance, and sometimes you'll get a raw rating of like T 5.5 when the thing's only like 50 miles an hour. You obviously don't want to bring it from 55 miles an hour to 115 miles an hour in the span of a half an hour. You know, that doesn't make any sense.
Ludicrous.
So, yeah, so the adjusted T number basically takes into effect strength limiting factors, the past trend of what thinning or weakening, stuff like that, and also what it's like, because usually with weaker storms you have to take into account what the cloud pattern looks like. So with those three factors put in, that eventually gets you your adjusted T number, and then the final T number puts any adjustments that have to be made that limits the amount of change that can happen to the T number within a certain period. For example, usually a Dvorak limit, you usually don't want to have a storm increase in intensity more than T 1.5 in 12 hours. That's pretty remarkable intensification. And that's something that we've seen with this storm. Very clearly, we've seen with this storm, but you typically don't want to go any steeper than that because, you know, it could look very, very good for an hour or two, and then all of a sudden it just loses its eye wall and it starts cycling again. And now you went from, oh, it's a Cat 4, and now I have to only call it a Cat 2 again because it doesn't have an eye. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be doing that, obviously. So the final T number basically prevents you from jumping the gun on a storm's intensity. And that's the difference between the three. So the raw is basically no context, how strong the storm is without any other factors involved. The adjusted number takes into account previous history of the storm and what the pattern of the storm is, what the cloud pattern is, to bring that down or up if needed. And then the final T number is any adjustments that have to be made that puts limits based off of how far up or down you can go with the T number.
Well, that's a quite thorough explanation there. How often does the Force 13 Cyclone tracker get updated? It's actually automated, so that's why you might see some errors. So we can override it when we want to, when something's going on. But generally it's automated using the US Navy's ATCF system. What generally is the expectations or effects in Kolkata?
Right now, what I would expect for Kolkata, because we don't really know where this storm's going to make landfall. So right now, I would be preparing for at least 10 feet of storm surge. It's not guaranteed, but I would be prepared for at least that. And I would be prepared for winds that would be exceeding 75 miles an hour for at least a duration of a couple of hours. That's as of right now. Now, once we proceed another 24 hours, we might be thinking, all right, maybe the forecast shifted back to the east and Kolkata might not be getting the hurricane force winds. Or the forecast will shift to the west and put Kolkata right in the path of getting the worst of the storm surge, which would be devastating. But that's just what I would prepare for right now, just something general. Prepare for some storm surge and some significant damage due to wind, and take any kind of precautionary measures necessary to safeguard yourself from those conditions.
Yep, completely agree. There's one more question I think we should try to answer at least before we go on break, because we've been watching a lot of the satellite imagery, but I don't think we've
Right.
named specifically. Is someone's asking which direction is the storm moving and what is its current speed? I know, Nathan, you have the ability to use the satellite imagery to map out the direction.
This one right now. Direction and speed. Of course, it depends how much time you take it over. I mean, going through that loop, it's moved 24 miles north-northwest in 4 hours. So that's 6 miles per hour north-northwest, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, the general trend is that direction. We're expecting to see that for, I'd imagine for like the next few hours or so, I believe. And then it's gonna start to turn up.
Of tonight's or this morning's coverage, wherever you are around the world, I'm sure everyone has got a lot more to say. We'll be back again soon, taking a short break. We've got to let our voices relax just a little bit, and then we'll be back with more from the team. Stay tuned. Hour of live coverage will begin in a moment. Stay up to date with the very latest on our online cyclone tracker on the website force13.com. The latest always on there. You can also find our YouTube channel, Force13, all in text. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter under the same name as well, at Force13 on there. You can also help the project become even better by becoming an Ultimate Fan on YouTube. To see the full list of Ultimate Fan benefits and to join, visit youtube.com/Force13/join. With a special thanks to our top supporters this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colours wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. We have upgraded the Cyclone Amphan. We have upped it to 140 miles per hour and a pressure of 933 millibars at this point. Something that we said we probably wouldn't do, but now we have done it. We have upgraded the Cyclone at this point. We are confident in saying 140 miles per hour sustained winds. That's around 230 or 235 kilometers per hour and a pressure of 933 millibars. That's the latest here from Force 13 HQ. This storm continues to intensify with impressive eye temperatures, which are continuing to get better along with those cloud tops. So now running with 140 mile per hour winds at 6:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, and we're here with one more hour of commentary before we finish up here for the night at Force 13 HQ and throw you back to the automated stream. So with that new information, let's bring it back to the team and with their thoughts tonight in this hour. Luke, Isaac, Codemo, Preston and Strat. I'm sorry, that keeps happening, doesn't it? No one can hear the team. Wonderful.
I'll just
They've just been speaking for 2 minutes to themselves. You know, we're just sitting here in an empty room for 2 minutes. It's all right. May as well just start all over again. I was absent-mindedly just looking through all the comments that were coming through just then, saying, "Hey, people are saying some interesting stuff, but you might want to start all over again there."
All right, let's start over again then. We're talking about the upgrade in intensity to 140, and I was saying it's a stark change from 12 hours ago when we were a bit ahead of the official agencies based on satellite appearance at 100, and the JGWC, for example, is still running down at 170 or at 75 miles an hour. To have them doubling their intensity to 150, and we're a bit behind them, waiting for potential further verification.
Which I think will come, but it's not yet. It's not yet.
The current estimate doesn't mean that we don't expect that, it could get there. It probably will at this point, unfortunately. It's just that, it's responsible to wait for further satellite verification.
And people call us irresponsible out there in some quarters. I mean, come on. No, let's not make any digs at anyone. You know who you are. But Strat, not good news, is it?
Oh, most certainly not. This is exactly what we didn't want to see. Last night, when I was making the video update about like 21 hours ago, or close to a day ago, we were hoping that because it wasn't looking particularly impressive, potentially due to wind shear inhibiting part of the eastern front, that the storm just wouldn't become as strong. I know for a while we were starting to back off on potential intensity forecasts. And then this morning, despite potential shear impacts, as we discussed the last hour on the eastern side, a very small distance between those minus 80s, even in the minus 50s, could be an impact from shear. The storm has just continued to intensify relentlessly for the past 12 hours now, from Category 1 to 2 storm all the way up to strong Category 4. And, although everyone's going to be throwing the question around, will it reach Cat 5, Cat 5, Cat 5?
And they are, trust
at this
me.
point, anything from here on up won't matter too much, rather than the fact that you're going to have an extremely powerful cyclone, not just with very strong winds and heavy rain, but potentially catastrophic storm surge impacting extremely low-lying areas compared to sea level, with very dense populations, and any evacuation orders will be complicated because there's a literal pandemic going on.
And it feels like we're going on and on and on and banging this drum about this, and unfortunately we're going to have to do this for the next 2 days, because that's when the storm's going to make landfall. But trust me, if we see this storm making landfall at this intensity in that particularly vulnerable area of the world, at this particularly vulnerable time in the world, the potential for utter catastrophe, the likes that we won't have seen for many decades, is on the cards. We sincerely hope it doesn't happen. We do not wish this kind of thing to happen anywhere at all. I would much rather never do a storm update ever again and just go and do the if storms just stop forming tomorrow, I'd first of all spend a few days in the garden lazing about, and then I'd probably make a bunch of hypothetical hurricane season animations like everyone else. But unfortunately, this is what we have to spend our time doing, and we don't really want to be here, and you don't really want to be here in this situation, watching us talking to you about how difficult this next few days is going to be.
I mean,
People focus way too much on the analytics rather than the actual issue at hand.
Pretty
This
much,
is a-
no. Go ahead, Luke.
no, it's fine. You go.
Pretty much, no matter what it does from this way on in terms of intensification, really isn't going to matter, like Strat said. It is going to produce colossal storm surge. It's going to be a very bad day when that landfall does come in Bangladesh and eastern India. This is a life-threatening situation, and we're watching it unfold before our eyes, which is heartbreaking to say the least. And my message to people watching a stream from India and Bangladesh is you need to be preparing for this terrible system that is headed your way.
Yeah, and of course many joining us, waking up over there in India and Bangladesh right now. We're here for another hour. How much speed when it hits the Bengal coast? I assume you're referring to how the strength of the storm rather than how fast it's moving in forward motion. It would appear, guys, it will lose some intensity before landfall, but probably favour Category 4 landfall.
Yeah.
With that Category 4, it's best to prepare for the worst. If you're in low-lying areas, if you haven't already, please evacuate.
Yeah,
Well-
I will say,
Oh, and one other thing when it comes to that, if you are in immediate danger, in the politest way possible, coronavirus, I mean, it's not even a thought. If you're in immediate danger, it's a much more immediate danger than the virus would ever be, even if you are in such a densely populated location. If you are about to get slammed by a Category 4 cyclone and you have a building that's not particularly up to code that you would get in places like, Florida and very well built locations, or if you're in a very vulnerable floodplain or a very low-lying island, you have a pretty much 100% chance of getting killed by this storm. Whereas if you caught coronavirus, it would be a little bit less, depending on your demographic.
Yeah, we can talk about semantics based on, ratios between potential deaths from storm surges and potential deaths from the pandemic. Unfortunately for governments overall, it's a lose-lose situation.
It is a lose-lose situation.
But, for your personal safety, especially if you're on the shore in an area that could be impacted directly by a landfall, by a high in Category 4 storm that will be bringing, it looks like at this point, a very severe storm surge with it. You don't necessarily even have to be somewhere where there's a ton of people. Even, you know, you don't have to do that. I'm sure there's social distance friendly ways, but you should act now for the safety of yourself and your family to get to a safer location.
Well,
All right, a lot of people are telling us that they have questions. The point is to ask the question rather than say that I have a question when you tag us. Just come out with the question. That's fine, and we'll try and get to you if we can. There is one that came in from Matthew Jones. How strong does IMD have the storm peaking at?
I believe 105 3-minute knots.
Which is so confusing in a nutshell, which is probably weaker than it is already now.
Yeah,
I think it's like 125.
Yeah.
We with 1 minute winds usually for like that's what intensity forecasts and current intensities are for us. You know, we usually see agencies do 1 minute or 10 minutes.
It's so confusing. Just guys, don't even do it. You know, our heads are gradually being turned into something that came out of a blender because of all of these conversions. Just let us do it for you. You'll have much less stress unless we get it wrong. Do you think the season in the Atlantic will be the 4th consecutive above average season, guys?
Well, we forecast
most likely.
So,
well, I mean, the average is only 12 point something or 13 overall now. It's quite low looking back.
You know, our estimate called for 14.
14.
And that doesn't include subtropical cyclones, technicality. So
we'll get 15 subtropical cyclones, 29 storms. There you go.
You know, that in theory that could happen. Very likely it won't. But in terms of total named storms, you could still very likely see an above average season, especially if this La Nina development ends up holding up and verifies into peak season.
I mean, we haven't. I know a lot of people have expressed, have raised eyebrows at the forecast that we did for the Atlantic on how it was maybe lowballing. We are looking into it, of course. We still think 1979 is a very good analog. I can tell you now, ahead of the May 31st update, those numbers will probably rise, maybe not by much, but we are getting clearer indications of what we might be seeing in the Atlantic Ocean this year. But that's not really what we're going to talk about in this hour. Let's get more questions here, Strat.
Multiple people asking about the eye temperature, if you want to bring up the latest eye
temperature. A lot of people are asking about the eye temperature. We just had an update earlier. It did drop. It did have a little relapse. It went up to minus 40 just before. So it was minus 29 at peak, and I'll be watching it again just to see if that was just a little blip, considering the resolution might be quite low, and whether we might get a lower temperature again. It's getting into that really dicey territory, because if it stays in the minus 20s, and if we disregard that minus 40 as a blip, just that one-off, if it stays in the minus 20s apart from that, then we are looking at least 150 mile per hour tropical cyclone here within, well, by the time we finish our commentary at the end of this hour. So things are developing, and in 2 or 3 hours, if those eye temperatures continue to increase into the minus 10s and the minus noughts and then into the positives, then you're definitely looking at a category 5.
Yeah.
And I don't think we necessarily mentioned this enough even yet. You know, we talk a lot about the eye temperature and stuff.
Just one more thing. JTWC going with 919 millibars. I can't fathom that.
That's a massive drop there.
I can't fathom that. I don't know where they've got that from. I don't understand that at all. Why they've done that. I don't agree with it.
Yeah. One other thing I will say too is, I know we've talked a lot about the eye temperature. I think we should mention just at least 1 or 2 more times how impressive the cloud tops of the general eye wall have been too throughout all this. I think we're going on the better part of 12 hours now with the ring of minus 80s all the way around. In the past hour,
still a monster.
Light in the northwestern quadrant, but still an extremely impressive storm.
Let's get back to that Himawari view that we've had quite often. And there you are again. You can still see them. All the pinks there. That's minus 82 degrees Celsius or lower. around the eye. And you can see it now on the Himawari as well. Don't forget the Himawari, this is near the edge of coverage. So the quality, especially looking inside the eye, isn't quite as good. It's literally, try and picture this. The satellite is based, I don't know how many thousands of miles away from Earth, but it is positioned above the Pacific Ocean. And this storm is around, what, about 5,000 miles away from the center point of that satellite over in the Indian Ocean. So it's like looking into a mug from about 4 feet away. You can't see the bottom of it. So that's why the Himawari is struggling to get the true temperature inside the eye. The Indian satellite is doing much better because it's almost directly over the storm, and we will get more temperature data on that in this hour. Any comments from the team whilst I go and get that latest score?
No matter how strong the storm is, this is a huge system, so it's more likely than not going to bring some catastrophic damage to wherever it makes landfall in that delta region. And this is just not a good situation at all, and it looks like it's going to try to get even stronger and stronger in the next few hours or so.
Yep, and I can confirm that because another eye temperature has come in from India, and it was a blip, that -40 that we had in the last frame, so we'll disregard that one. And the latest satellite estimate now is -23.
Yeah, I will say, though, despite that, maybe slight waning in the amount of -80s in the northwestern quadrant.
And that would happen if an eye gets, that usually does happen when an eye gets, it's sort of like a transfer of energy, really.
That's true. It could easily end up holding up and maintaining itself, but for the time being, maybe the slightest of weakening in the overall cloud tops. But still, that whole area is strong -70s. And we're playing a game of trends here, so we're watching this over the course of several hours.
I've got to tell you right now, if the current rate continues by 10 a.m. in India, local time, this will be a Category 5.
2.5 hours from now.
3 hours from now, pretty much, right? It'll be a Category 5. If the current trend continues. If the current trend stops dead and stays level where it is at right now, it'll be 150 miles an hour in 2 hours, or in 1 hour.
Right, and one thing I noticed is that the best track file is uploaded for 0Z, and Amphan, my bad, is now still the 4th largest cyclone in the North Indian Ocean by 34 knot wind radius.
The 4th largest.
The 4th largest.
We are zoomed in, so it could be hard to tell the exact size, but if you zoom out, it is a pretty significantly sized storm, much larger.
No, it is. We were talking about that last night, in particular, about its size.
Was it last night we were talking about not tropical storm force winds, but
Yes.
30 knot winds extending very far out from the center.
Correct, yes.
Several hundred nautical miles, even. So even a slight increase in influence in those intensities, end up bringing gale force winds very far from the center of the storm. And again, to reiterate, in comparison to Vongfong, which we were covering a couple days ago, this storm is much larger in size.
Here's a question from the weatherman. Nice name. Has the eye grown in size? Well, let's take a look at that latest frame. It's been generally around 18 miles wide, and at the moment, if we were going to measure that, it's about 19, so it's staying about the same. And someone wants to talk about rainfall. We've not looked at rainfall for a little while. We can show you that now on this imagery here. If you've not seen this before, if you have seen this before, you might be a little bit shocked to see just how much the rain rates have increased. Because I've got to tell you, under those -80s strat, there is an enormous amount of rain falling. All of those black areas that you see on your screen right now are rain rates. Okay, this thing won't even load. Rain rates of over 55 millimeters per hour.
I will say,
What?
tracking cyclones with this particular satellite imagery, I have never seen, at least on a live stream, or in any video update I've ever made, a storm with rain rates this intense covering such a specific large area. You
A
might
large
see,
area indeed. Yes, because it's very easy to because this imagery happens every 15 minutes. So if you see a black area, that's not to say it's going to be 60 millimeters an hour. If 15 minutes later it goes back to purple again, I think you get my drift. But you can see quite a few areas under there that will have been black for over an hour. And if that was to move ashore, then you've got chaos.
It just goes to show you how much rain this system will produce on top of the storm surge if it continues on its current rate. And that's why we're stressing that this storm is potentially catastrophic and could cause some very severe.
Yeah,
Let's just zoom out on this and show some of the areas that might be getting some significant rainfall rates right now. So we've still got what's left of that little monsoonal pattern that this storm generated out of to its south, which is sort of like a quasi band in itself, but some kind of monsoonal characteristics. That's just pushing south just off the coast of Sri Lanka, just waiting for all this imagery to load. It does do it eventually. Quite a bit of rain spreading towards the southern Andaman Islands, or is that the Nicobar Islands? I'm not sure which ones are which. Sri Lanka getting quite a lot of rain right now, especially in the north and west. Southern tip of India, significant amounts of rain in these early hours. One or two showers inland towards the western side in the where is that? The Karnataka region. In Andhra Pradesh, there are some small, fairly weak bands that are moving through, but there could be some locally heavy rainfall amounts, especially in the Chennai area and northwards up to Nellore. I do forget the names every so often. I'm not all that familiar with India. I've never visited, unfortunately. It does sound like a beautiful place. Visakhapatnam is not far away from some potentially significant bands, although they're not quite there yet, and they could still dissipate before they get there, because a few others have done so already. But that's something to watch out for in that region of Odisha in the next 2 to 3 hours. Over up towards Bangladesh, very little going on there at the minute. Quite dry up there by the looks of things on here. Let me just see if I can confirm that looking at the water vapor imagery, and you might get a reason why there's no rain happening down there, and that's because if we can get that frame loaded, well, it's certainly a less moist environment up there. Well, we're waiting for the imagery. We've got a checkerboard now, waiting for all the imagery to load. The dark greens there, that shows you where all the massive amounts of moisture are. The blues, less moisture. The yellows, there we go now. Very dry air is where the yellows are. Blue is sort of so-so. The lighter blue, a little bit moist. But then obviously you can see the massive amounts of moisture associated with the cyclone and this massive monsoonal mass over here towards the west, which is engulfing the western coast of India and the Maldives. So that's where we are with the water vapor. Just over half an hour left with us here before we go off the air, or at least our voices do, but the automated streaming service will keep running here on Force 13 Live, so you'll be able to see at least, if not hear, our voices. You'll be able to see what's going on in real time. The images do update in real time. I think we did have a few issues last night when we went off the air. We've been, we've been dealing with some new differences in how we run our operation, but we hope it's incredibly useful to you. Over to Isaac's imagery. I know I've been talking a lot just now, so over to you. What are you seeing?
I'm a little busy right now, but I'll talk regardless. You can see on this imagery, you can see the water vapor loop, and you can see dry air is, at this point in time at least, not an issue at all. Really, the only thing I see that could potentially weaken the storm is either internal struggles going on with the storm maybe not being able to form that eye wall, perhaps, or perhaps the storm staying over the same areas for a longer period of time, and maybe able to upwell some of the cooler waters and weaken it that way. Is the only really two ways I could think of the storm weakening. Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts about that other than land, really.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's mostly correct. There could be a little bit of wind
People are
shear.
asking us to compare this storm to Katrina. Why are you
think it's
asking
actually,
us to do
Sort of
that?
actually, apples and
Two
tomatoes.
different, very
Why
situations.
I think this
are
is
you
more comparable
asking
to.
us to do that? I
I
don't
think this is more
understand these
comparable.
people.
The cyclone is probably more comparable to Cyclone Sitter in 2007 than anything. For a
Speaking
recent
of,
example.
Sure.
sorry, Isaac. Speaking of comparisons, we have a question from Facebook from Kalahanku Samachare. What is the comparison between the 1999 super cyclone to this powerful storm that we are seeing in the the Bay of Bengal?
I'm assuming they mean 91.
Yeah, probably.
Nathan, you got this, I think.
I got what,
I think it
sorry?
is.
Comparison between the 1991 super cyclone.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I was looking at some comments. The 1991 Bangladesh cyclone.
Yeah.
Well, that storm happened a little bit earlier. I believe it was moving quicker. It was moving much more straight towards Bangladesh. It was situated further towards the east. It was very strong, Category 5, at least 160 miles per hour, possibly higher at peak. We don't really know because of the satellite imagery deficiencies. But it struck the area. It caused a huge amount of flooding. It's one of the most destructive cyclones in history, with I believe at least 2 million buildings damaged or destroyed, mainly due to flooding. The storm killed, I think it was 166,000 people, which is a similar death toll to that of Nargis in 2008 in Myanmar. It was, I think, a Category 5 landfall. But again, we've got different situations. Even on 1990, the population of Bangladesh is quite a bit higher than what it was back then. 3 times as large as it was in 1970 when the Bola cyclone hit. But let's not forget, it's not the strength of the storm that's the killer usually. It's other parameters. Not just talking about rain directly, but we've just said this is, according to you, I've not done the research myself, the 4th largest cyclone in the basin. If the 4th largest cyclone in the basin is coming towards you, delivering how wide is that massive moisture plume? From east to west, there it is, 400, 500 miles wide, striking an area which has a population, if you draw a 500-mile line from Kolkata to wherever you'll end up getting in 500 miles, you're talking a population of about 200 million people. And let's not forget, if in a worst case scenario with this storm, you could see 5 million people, 4.8 million people at one point were projected to have Category 3 force winds from this storm, 115 miles per hour, 185 kilometer per hour sustained winds or above, which would be very destructive. And a population, I'm starting to forget these figures now, what was it? I think it was 70 million if it was to strike in the Ganges River Delta. 70 million people, 70 million people would experience hurricane force winds. That's 9 New York cities. That's quite a lot of people. That's a worst case scenario, and that's why, and we've got to remind you of that being a possibility, the worst case scenario. It looks now that won't happen quite that way, but we are still looking at something. I mean, those numbers in themselves were absolutely mind-boggling. Even smaller numbers would be mind-boggling, and unfortunately, I think we're still going to see something pretty bad, possibly the worst storm of this decade.
Yeah, and we actually have some new microwave imagery. I don't know if Isaac can pull it up. I put the link in our live chat room. Very well defined inner eye wall structure. I don't think there's concentric eye walls, even though there's a bit of a loop around. I'm pretty sure that's just general convection from the system rotating around. Regardless, though, if you want to start speculation of any eye wall replacement cycle eventually, The microwave imagery now, compared to 12 hours ago, is a massive difference. The eastern eyewall, the eastern quadrant, is still the weakest. But
Is this on Isaac's screen?
I'm trying to get it up right now, but I don't have it on right now currently.
I gave you the link for it, so you should be able to.
I didn't see it.
That
But I
last
did
image
find
is
an image.
interesting, yeah.
I did find an image from 23/7 UTC, the most recent.
That's an interesting one. But what you can also see there again, though, is just how bulky it is on the western side as opposed to the east. There's hardly anything there on the eastern side. That's not good news either, because India happens to be on the western side of this.
And that's possibly due to a bit of wind shear influence on the system. I know we talked about it last hour.
It must be. It must be. We've not got long left here. We've got another half an hour to take your questions and comments. It's just gone 7 o'clock in the morning over in India, and we're happy to have you on board. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air in this 30-minute period, please send us a message. We've been working tirelessly on this storm, so do beg our pardon if we sound like we've had a rough night out. We haven't. We've had a rough night in. But this is what we're currently looking at. We declared this storm 140 miles per hour not long ago and a pressure of 933 millibars. That's around 210 kilometers per hour. And there's that microwave image.
Yeah. A very intense system. Unfortunately, we could see this try to push Category 5 status. Could still not do it somehow. But regardless of that, it is important to point out that anything from this strength really upwards won't mean too much of a difference, especially if you're in the direct landfall area in terms of wind speed. You're going to be getting absolutely catastrophic conditions. And then furthermore, it is important to note that 90% of the deaths from cyclones are flooding related, not necessarily related to wind at all. So what you do need to monitor very closely is potential storm surge, especially when we're going into a massive delta region with massive populations living in very low elevations. If we get a storm surge, 5 meters plus, which is very doable with a system of this size and intensity, in about 3 days, you're looking at a very bad situation. So we do need one of the things we keep track of is that wave height, the maximum levels near the center of the storm. I know the last one that David got for us was 45 feet, which is about 13 to 15 meters. That doesn't really reflect what the actual storm surge will be. That's just the maximum wave height center of the storm, where we're pushing those waters the highest.
All breaking news.
Yes.
Nathan, I think you're just...
Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
You had breaking news.
Oh, okay. Well, the breaking news is that the Indian Meteorological Department has upgraded the Cyclone Amphan to an extremely severe cyclonic storm, the highest their rating scale goes.
That's the second highest, actually.
Oh, it is? Yeah.
Super cyclonic storm is the highest.
Yeah. So, obviously, agencies are picking up on the intensification at this point. There's no way they can't.
I still think India are behind. If you think we're behind, some people think we're behind. India are even more behind. JTWC, I think, have jumped the gun just a little bit, although we do have another new eye temperature from the Indian satellite, and it's another little blip. It's gone back up to minus 30, but still you're looking at 20s and 30s right now, and if that does continue, then we're looking at 150 as the JTWC have gone with.
Yeah. Regardless of the exact wind speed, we're just looking at a potentially devastating situation. We can.
And just a reminder, because everyone uses kilometers per hour in this area, 150 miles per hour is 240 kilometers per hour. That's sustained winds with gusts of possibly much higher, up to 300 kilometers per hour maybe. And rainfall amounts, well, we don't really know how much rainfall there's going to be just yet, but we're probably looking on the order of somewhere around 500 millimeters in some places.
Yep.
Right. And a really big concern with this is going to be storm surge as well. And we could easily see storm surges of maybe even 15 to 20 feet, if not more, from this thing, given its very large size and
Yeah. I know we're approaching the end of the live commentary phase for tonight's stream, at least.
Not that close. We got more questions yet, Strat.
So we're 25 minutes away, but just because of that, I know
Strat's counting down the minutes. Yes, go on.
No, that's not true. But just because we're getting near to the end, I'm sure a lot of viewers are going to have a lot of questions. I know last time we went through almost a whole hour of just questions.
We did.
If you have any questions that you want answered, start your message with Force13 in text or at Force13. Lights up the message in orange for us, makes it easier for us to see. And we'll do our best to answer as many of the questions for you guys as you possibly have during the next phase, and also on Facebook as well.
And if we don't manage to answer your questions on the air today, you can always send us a message on social media. We will have someone on hand to respond on Facebook messages and also on Twitter if you tag us on there. We're everywhere, most places.
Yeah, what we are gonna see here is that the side is gonna keep getting warmer as this as the cyclone keeps developing further and further, and sadly Cat 5 seems far in the realm of possibility with this system, but luckily, even though it still will be a strong cyclone, it should peak before it makes landfall somewhere in the central Bay of Bengal, and then it should go on a weakening trend as it makes landfall. But even then, it's going to be a huge cyclone with winds, I'd say, at least Cat 4, I believe. And that's nothing to take lightly at all. I think the Indian Meteorological Department is lagging behind quite a fair bit, and it's just not good at all. This system is 140 mile per hour, and they're just lagging behind by so much, and that's gonna allow less time to react to the situation.
I just had one or two questions about whether this storm will affect China in any way. I mean, if its remnants go, I don't think the remnants will make it over there.
Yeah, the Himalayas are in the way of that.
Yeah, probably.
The easternmost Himalayas, the lower mountains, but they're still pretty damn high.
Yeah, we do have a flood of questions starting to come in.
We do have a flood of questions, so let's go. Is there a possibility... Oh, it's just gone already. I think it was a question about whether it would be more deadly than the Ebola cyclone. We don't really want to speculate on that kind of morbid thing, honestly. Will it get to 185 miles per hour? Well, nothing's impossible, but it would be a first, let's say. Okay, it'll be a first. What's the CDPS rating? If Devon was still here, we might know, but I assume it must still be around a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, unless the landfall intensity gets upped a good amount, which fortunately, it seems like it won't be a potentially devastating Category 5 at landfall because of less conditions near shore.
What's more at risk from Tropical Storm Arthur, Bermuda or New England?
Bermuda.
Bermuda?
Absolutely.
Look, I'll reiterate it again because there's always a flood of new viewers coming in and out. There's a lot of clickbait a couple days ago saying
Don't take the bait
before the storm was even named. Thumbnails and stuff showing a low right off New Jersey with arrows pointing at it and stuff.
Don't take the bait.
Yeah, don't take the bait because at that time
there's so many dumb people that take the bait. I'm sorry if you are one of those people that take the bait. I just did call you dumb. I don't know why you do it. Unless it's an honest mistake. Okay.
Look, there was a significant model split at the time at how now Arthur would interact with this mid-level low that's going to come down. About half the models were saying it could try to swing into Delmarva, and the other half were pushing it out to sea. Now, basically, all of them push it out to sea. None of them push it up the east coast towards New England at all. You're going to get more adverse conditions from the upper mid-level low itself than actually Arthur.
Yeah.
No major models bring it into the Northeast. The only one that even tries, it's the HWRF, but that actually has it after it's absorbed into this upper level low as a non-tropical system at all, not even
All right.
so.
If we could make our responses a little bit shorter, because there's a load of questions. What a percent chance of Arthur becoming a hurricane? We said this earlier. It's near nil at this point.
Can't actually pass through. The storm's weaker now.
When is the earliest, do you think, we will reach the La Nina threshold?
Earliest would be like July, something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. It has been a very significant change in the past month from
I would say June.
positive to now about minus 0.3 in the Enzo phase. So
I mean, like late June, early July would be like the earliest.
What is the elevation of the terrain that the Amphan will impact? Devon did speak about that at length. I think it was in the first hour. But very low-lying areas, very high risk areas, especially along the border between West Bengal and Bangladesh, and all of the coastal region of Bangladesh is generally less than 5 meters above sea level, and any and all of that could be, you could literally have 5-10 million people inundated with storm surge. We did have some more as well. Can we take another Satid just to see? We'll do all our checks just at the end, just before we finish up. We'll do some checks. Are these storms capable of producing tornadoes? I guess that can apply to both of these right now.
Well, I mean, with any tropical system, there's always a threat of tornadoes if you have enough shear with the system. Now, I think Arthur is probably going to go off too far to the east to really produce a major tornado threat to the Carolina and Outer Banks. Now, with Amphan, really depends on how much shear there is in the north, in the quadrants, to produce tornadoes. But, when you do have tropical cyclones, there's always a possibility that you could get a few spin-up tornadoes within the outer bands.
yeah.
All right. Julia Nasica Genesis Juliana, interesting name, says, will the cyclone break Typhoon Haiyan's record? No, I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid. I'm very pleased that it won't. It's got a cat in hell's chance. It's not going to go anywhere near Typhoon Haiyan at all. Here's another question from Diane Smith, though. Will this be a funny type storm? It could still be a funny type storm.
How long did it take for Fanny to clear its eye?
Well, I know that Fanny was ahead of this storm this time yesterday when I was looking and comparing. Let's just have a look now. Can someone tell me the coordinates of this storm at the moment?
Well, on the imagery, it's about 14 north and about 86 degrees east.
14 and 86. Let's
Roughly.
compare that with where Fanny was at the same latitude. She was saying 14 north.
Roughly, probably more so 13 than 14, if I'm being honest. But it is 86 degrees east.
13.5.
It's
Probably.
ATTF says 13.1, 86.4.
13.1. Okay, so this is really interesting. At 12.7 degrees north, this storm, Amphan, or Amphan, was at 85 miles an hour, right? And that feels like a long time ago now. Fanny at that time, at that latitude, was at 105 miles per hour. Now at 13.5 degrees north, this storm is on the verge of being 150 miles per hour here at this rate, and Fanny at that time was 120.
Yeah.
So it is now ahead of that curve.
Although it is how fast was Fanny moving in comparison at this point? Because
Faster than this storm.
Amphan still, for the most point, has moved under 200 miles in the past 2 days.
It's going pretty slow.
It starts to move now. Someone asked the speed of it. It's about 5 knots.
We said before 6 miles an hour, didn't we?
Yeah. But yesterday, the whole day yesterday, it moved maybe 20 miles or so. My video updates 24 hours apart. It was at the same longitude and barely moved north. So,
all right, let's see if we can get another eye temperature check from the Indian satellites. I'm not sure there's an update. I'm just trying to check on this. It'll be a little while on that one.
Yep. Let's see. Someone's asking, there's a spot in the southwestern eye wall that it seems the cloud tops aren't quite as cold. Is that just a blip, or is there something more?
I know what you're talking about. There is a possible dry slot. I'll look into that in just a moment. I'm just getting these temperatures.
Strong minus 70 degrees there anyways. And still mostly minus 80s. If that holds, maybe it's a bit of a concern for the storm in terms of its intensification.
Yep, so we've just had another eye reading of minus 25 now.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go back 2 hours to see what the temperature was 2 hours ago, because this helps us shape where we're at right now in terms of how strong this storm really is. So 2 hours ago it was at was it really? Wow, according to IMD it was only minus 33. So that's what we'll run with on the SATID, which we're going to calculate now, and I'll go calculate that and see what number we come up with to close on tonight. In the meantime, keep sending a few more questions. Let's go over to Isaac's imagery, because it's a nice looking imagery. What kind of imagery is that?
It's a band off of the site called Easterly Wave. It's called IRCA. I don't know what exactly that means. Yeah, I don't know exactly what that means, but it is an IR band of some sort.
That's quite clear. That's quite clear.
Jason will probably know if he's on here.
Jason is a satellite expert, yeah.
And then here's some water vapor. You can see the eye coming out in the last few frames.
We're going to leave it on your screen for a while here, Isaac, whilst I do these calculations.
And, yeah, when we see these, still not, we're still looking for those trends, and very importantly, if you look at the Himawari, which I think that's the one that's showing, I'm not sure when the frames end on that. I know near the top of the hour, we're talking very slightly about maybe a bit of a waning in the northwestern side, but to not take that, fully, because still early on and you'd need to wait for verification, would point out since then that the northwestern side has reimbursed itself with more strong minus 80 degrees.
Shortly.
In the meantime, keep asking those questions. Someone's asking, is the eye getting warmer? It's
generally yes, yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a general yes.
I could see even on the water vapor, the white's starting to become more evident on the inside the eye. So it is doing it gradually over time. It's not doing it as super fast right now. It's just it appears to be a gradual process at this time, at least.
Yeah.
Someone asked what satellite imagery website do you use?
There's a lot of them. You can see the one you use on the screen.
This is from Cyclonic Weather, by a person named Alex Borham. He makes some good imagery. He just recently developed this about I think about a month or two ago, actually, and this is one of his imagery that he has available on here, the wide look water vapor. I believe this is 4 kilometer water vapor look right now, and it's beautiful, really beautiful to say the least.
I'm aware of him. If you are watching, sorry for the unfortunate surname that you seem to have. But SATID has just been completed, and it's quite interesting. And that's the end of the show.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it? No.
All right. Our latest final SATID estimate here has come in. It's 146. So that means that after the end of this commentary, in just about 10 minutes time, we will be making a further upgrade to this storm to 145 miles per hour, and we'll be determining what pressure that is. I imagine it will be in the 920s somewhere, but until that changes, it's what you see on the screen. But shortly we will be updating that information, and we'll present it on the screen. So this gradual intensification is continuing. The eye temperature is continuing to warm. The cloud tops are staying very firm. We've got just a few more minutes left here. More questions. How common are typhoons in the Bay of Bengal? Well, I mean, they're not called typhoons unless they've come from the Western Pacific, and there have been a small amount that have done so, but I assume you mean all cyclones. And every so often you see on the left hand side of your page the most active seasons in the North Indian Ocean tend to be around 8, 9, 10 storms. Generally it's much quieter, maybe 4, 5, not sure what the actual average is. And of course there's two major peaks to a season in the North Indian Ocean, April, May, and November, December. Well, we've got our May peak right here in front of us.
Yep, we usually get a decent spike of activity in this basin around this time, and then also we get a second spike, I believe, around October, November.
October's a little early, more November.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it can happen in October, Cyclone Amphan.
Yep, we did have that.
Um,
Remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
think we should try to dispel at least near-term intensities at the moment from getting too wish-casty. Someone in the chat saying, I think 175 to 190 miles an hour. Change my mind.
Okay, here's how this is gonna
Look,
work.
you're entitled to your opinion, but the law of averages, the law of probabilities are very, very much against you, my friend.
Not just that, but that is about 20% above the highest official agency at the moment as well, with no real solid backing to it.
I don't
Regardless, it's still very powerful. I think it's this, and then offer no reason other than saying you want it to be strong or you think it's strong. It's counterproductive, and in general leads to the potential spreading of misinformation, which when we're talking about, potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of lives on the line is exactly what you don't want to do.
You know how much Strap hates his misinformation.
Very much so, absolutely. It's the worst of the worst.
It certainly is. Oh, there's so much of it out there. You got to be really careful. We hope that you can trust us. We'd like to think that you can trust us here at Force 13. But just a few more minutes if you want to send in some quick questions, and then our faces will be going off the air, but the imagery and the graphics will remain. They will be unmanned, so if there are any changes in numbers, the graphics won't change, but the images will still be there for you.
Yep.
And that's all that matters.
Yeah. A couple more questions coming in. Thoughts on the direction it's going? So I think they mean the current, directions, like northwest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's moving northwest. I don't know the speed. I think it's
About
last
5
time we
miles
checked
per
around
hour.
7 or 8.
It's about 5.
5? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
5 to 6 miles an hour, about 5 knots. So, compared to Vong Fong, as a comparison for recent coverage, it is moving slower at the moment. But it will pick up in
Long
forward
Fong wasn't
speed.
exactly fast.
It wasn't exactly fast either. But Amphan will pick up in forward speed as it nears landfall. For the time being, though, it still isn't moving particularly fast. Unfortunately, in terms of upwelling, though, I'm pretty sure it's moving just fast enough that it won't get stuck and try to obliterate itself from upwelling at the moment.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Generally, a storm needs to be moving at around 5 miles an hour to avoid upwelling.
Yeah.
Right past that threshold right now, even if just by a tiny bit, unfortunately.
That's right.
Barely there.
So I don't know what our schedule is going to be for tomorrow, because we've still got this storm barreling down. It's a nightmare for scheduling. But I assume that we will be back again at the same time as we were earlier today for the evening update local time at 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We will probably be on the air at that point to give you at least an hour's update, and then we'll be back again in the morning and possibly other times if conditions warrant. But even though we're not entirely sure when we're going to be live on our YouTube channel, you can of course follow us on all of our other platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and you can send an email if you fancy to me directly, contact@force13.com, or you can join us on Discord, our Discord server, which is a rather thriving community these days of a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and a nice little community for weather watchers, and anyone is welcome, even if your interest is only fleeting or minuscule. In the meantime, I'm waiting for a file to load so that I can play the ending trailer to finish tonight's stream. But we can take a few more questions whilst we do that, hey?
Yeah, I will say in terms of video updates tonight and complementing live coverage, there should be one for Amphan within the next 2 to 2.5.
Yes, schedule on that. Yes, that's a good thing to say. David is on task. I'm sure he's listening to me right now. He is, I believe, still on for an update at 5Z, which is, when's that? That's 3 hours from now, so about 10:30 Indian time. There will be an update out on the Force 13 YouTube channel by our Australia correspondent.
And there will also likely be a video update on Tropical Storm Arthur by midnight Eastern time tonight. It's going to probably be 11:30 or midnight Eastern is going to be when you see it.
Because we got so many updates to be doing.
Yeah.
It's like the middle to late August at the minute out there. It really is.
I mean, you
Except
just
we're
gotta...
in May.
What's that, Strat?
Except we're in May.
Except we're in May.
And hopefully this is, in terms of bad storms, the worst of the year right now. But, if luck is not against us, which 2020's been some bad luck. I don't know, man.
I'm still stalling for time right now. Anything else you guys want to say before we finish up?
I'd just say that this is a very dangerous situation, and all interests in Bangladesh and Eastern India need to keep a close eye on this. Make sure you're watching it closely. Get your safety plans out, and please take the storm as seriously as it can be taken. This is a very dangerous situation, and your life is at risk when the storm does make landfall if you are in Eastern India and Bangladesh.
Particularly
Exactly.
in low-lying areas, you need to be planning ahead now. If you are going to evacuate, you probably should do so within the next 24 to 36 hours, because as soon as conditions start to go downhill, they will go downhill fast. If you're in the Odisha region, West Bengal, please take this extremely seriously. It is life-threatening. Even if this weakens slightly before landfall, there's a question about that. It is probable that it weakens at least slightly before landfall. That doesn't change the fact that it will be an extremely dangerous cyclone, bringing potentially 6 meters plus of storm surge to areas that have max elevations of 2 to 3 meters. I implore every single one of you watching, this video, whenever it becomes archived in a couple hours, the stream right now, or, watch local news at all, to stay safe and have a plan ready to go immediately if you're in harm's way.
All right,
And
I'm
of
now
course,
gonna.
I just want to say really.
Yes.
I just want to say really quickly, if we have anybody that's in the direct path of this, to make sure you call them and make them aware of this if they have not already. and let them know how serious of a situation this is. And just gonna go.
Okay, that went a bit too loud. Hold on. That went a bit too loud. Sorry about that. Keep going.
I was just gonna say really quickly before you stream to make sure you if you have anybody that's in the path of this, make sure you call them or make them aware at least of this situation. Let them steer them to the official information from the Indian Meteorological Department and other official means of getting information. And that's really all I could say. Really, just stay safe and stay aware of this. Go ahead, Nathan.
I'm sorry about that. It's just how we wanted to end this. Just to show you everything that's going on, this is what we usually put on the end of our stream. Because we're working with new stuff, the audio levels just decide they want to go stupid and they just